Dyer wave
3.
Our anthropology is not derived by human psychology or, empirical data from MIT or something like this. It's derived from the revealed aspect of what we see in Christology. And so there's no real way to diagnose man's problem and to understand man and man's anthropology, as I said, without the right theology. Logos is the icon of the Father, and man is the icon of God. We are the image of God.
Dyer wave
3. Put on my blue suede shoes and I boarded the train. Touchdown in a flying train in the streets of Memphis. In the middle of the pouring rain. Watch out for the crime. W.C. Handy, won't you look down over me? Yeah, I got a first class ticket, but I'm as blue as a little bitty tiny girl can be. 'Cause I was walking in Memphis with my head looking over my shoulders. Walking in Memphis, nervous walking in Memphis. Get it? Because I'm scared walking in Memphis. Get it? Anyway, what's up? Welcome back, all you Jay's Analysis viewers. It's been a while. We've been on the road. We did an event, had a lot of fun. We were in D.C. Haven't been to the District of Criminals in a long time. I don't even know how long. Maybe 2012, 11. I went to a debate at the Spy Museum one time in 2011 or 12, and that wasn't really a fun trip. It was kind of a joke debate, and do you really fear the way I fear? Exactly. Trying to remember what I did. I remember getting sick eating tacos, and I was like, man, Washington D.C. tacos taste like dishwater liquid or something. I got throwing up. It was awful. And it wasn't a very good debate. Anyway, it was just dumb. And then I remember the first time I went to D.C. was like when I was 18, 19. Remember Promise Keepers? Man, that was so stupid. It was all really dumb. But I was like hyped up evangelical, oh, we got to go pray for the nation in D.C. at the Promise Keepers meeting. And there was like, I don't know, 40 of us men from the church men's group on a stank ass Greyhound, and the bus broke down. And when I say a stank ass Greyhound, I mean a stank ass Greyhound because it was hot and the bus broke down, and for some reason that affected the sort of a soup cauldron of the onboard potty turned into a soup. Now it didn't spill, but it was like cooking in 100-degree burnt up Greyhound. It's basically a giant Greyhound shit cauldron, a soup bubbling over at 100 degrees. And everybody had to exit the Greyhound, and we had to wait for like literally at a McDonald's. We had to wait at McDonald's for about 6 or 7 hours for another Greyhound bus to show up. And so the first two trips to Washington DC were not very fun. And then I can't remember if I've been any other times, maybe another time. Anyway, but this recent time was actually, we had a good time. Met some cool people, met a couple prominent people. It was really fun. Some good dinners. Speaking event went really well. So yeah, great times. If you would, guys, welcome. Hit like and share. And today, as you know, we'll be getting into a great entry into our historical analyses of geopolitical texts dealing with the Great Game, Cold War, World War I, World War II, and particularly here, the place of socialism. And the place of socialism throughout the 20th century, well, in the 19th century, is important because we need to know who is behind socialism. Not just the dumb goober faces on the street that actually believe this nonsense, but who is putting money into it, right? Follow the money, this kind of a thing. And everybody knows we sort of we begat this like a Bible daddy. We begat the Quigley lectures, who begat the, what else? All the other global elite texts, right? all the way up till the present day. And, this has been a 6-year series, kind of ongoing. And we have a new entry. Now, this is a book by a historian and an analyst, not from the system. So technically, yes, it is not a writing of the elite. But it's a encapsulation, crystallization of many of the writings of the elite, and a continuation, essentially, of the work of Professor Sutton. So since we just covered Sutton's Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, it only makes sense to cover the update of that, because that book, you guys remember, we just covered the hour 2. So if you're in my on my Rockfin channel, if you're a member at the website, the second half of the lecture for Sutton's Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, we just completed that, and that went out to the subscribers, recently, a few days ago. And then I don't even remember how it happened. So I think I happened upon this because I tweeted out a page from Sutton's book on Twitter, and this led to people on Twitter referencing Lord Milner, and somehow this led me to a book on Amazon, The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy by Johann Ratiu, who obviously is a Romanian. Don't know anything about this guy other than it says he's an independent historian. And it's a very scholarly book, so it fits perfectly with our series. This book came out in 2012. So it came out right when Terence McKenna said the Mayan calendar was about to blow us all up, right? What a bunch of nonsense that was. The Mayan calendar. Pretty sure he talked about that, right? He and Robert Anton Wilson early on talked about this Mayan calendar nonsense. But a nonsense. But anyway, 2012 is when this book came out, and the subtitle is about the international elite, basically trying to bring out this convergence, right? A lot of people still caught up in the older dialectics, and not even dialectics, caught up in old trialectics. The trialectics of the bad guys are the capitalist, liberal, economic people. The bad guys are the socialists. The bad guys are the fascists. The bad guys are the Democrats. So you hear, these are all the bad guys. Bad. They're all the bad guys. And really the 20th century is positioned as just a bunch of facing off of these various bad guys. And certainly amongst every one of those camps, there's multiple bad guys. And we always try to focus here upon having that objective analysis. Now, totally objective analysis is not possible. Nobody's going to be completely free of presuppositions or completely neutral in their influence, their background, etc. That's not possible. But what we always strive to do in analysis in whatever field is to be as objective as we can be, to try to get to the most accurate assessment of the situation. So no, when it comes to history and geopolitics and espionage, we're never going to have a perfect, complete story, right? We're not going to have God's perspective. When it comes to paradigms and philosophy and divine revelation, that's a separate category. We have access to that only because of God's self-disclosure. Not because we're omniscient, but because an omniscient God reveals that to us. But when we're in the domain of the historical, the empirical, we are much more limited, and so we have to assess the available data and come to the best conclusions that we can. And very few researchers, as you guys know, we've been covering this for many years, really get that deep into looking past the dialectics, because the Cold War, especially World War I, World War II, and Cold War, we're just really super caught up in either or. We're either with us or with the enemies. You're with us or the bad guys. Well, now, isn't that a little overly simplistic? And don't the academic elites from the establishment themselves always say, you're being overly simplistic if you think it's a good guy, bad guy situation. Okay. Yeah, right. So if it's overly simplistic to think in pure good guy, bad guy terms, then shouldn't we, by your own logic, look for higher level influences at a international money power corporate level? And that's precisely what we're looking at here, is the international structure of capitalism in its perverted form of monopoly capital. And as you guys know, Quigley covers this. We lectured on this 6 years ago. And this book relies heavily on Quigley. In fact, in the introduction, the book is dedicated to, or he gives a special thanks to two great works of American history, Carroll Quigley and Rose Martin. So, of course, we all know about Quigley, but he doesn't really focus on tragedy. He does mention tragedy and hope, but mainly he speaks here of Anglo-American establishment by Quigley, which we've lectured through in the past. And then he mentions the Fabian Freeway by Rose Martin, which I've never heard of and sounds interesting. So now after reading this, I'm going to have to get that book. But who was the real power behind the dialectics of the 20th century? That's what we focus on here. That's why we had such a deep 8 lecture, 16-hour discussion of Quigley, right? The whole 12 or 1,300 pages of the text that we lectured through. And again, as you guys know, we lecture through everything here that's academic and open source. So we don't typically, in the geopolitical sphere, when it comes to the writings of the elite, we stick to what's provable and demonstrable from open source material, open source intelligence, public white papers, books, and documents. And so I was impressed with Ratiu's research. He has, I was guesstimating, I think he has probably 400 or 500 footnotes, looks like. Around 400, maybe 500. So it's very well sourced. A lot of academic literature, a lot of scholarly research, a lot of historical texts. Not much reliance on, quote, conspiracy. There's a couple, quote, conspiracy texts that he references or relies on here and there. But for the most part, this text is academic. And so we're going to be looking, he's citing in the footnotes of the chapters, Fabian authors, Colonel House, Lord Lionel Curtis. He's citing Bernard Shaw. He's citing most of the writings of H.G. Wells, who was, of course, a Fabian for a time. He's citing Quigley. He's citing Brzezinski, etc. So definitely a book that fits perfectly into what we cover. Thank you guys for the super chats. As you guys know, the way to support this channel is via super chats. And it's kind of a long book, so I had over the weekend the chance to read about the first 100 pages. And this is a 500-page text, so I don't know that we'll get through this book in one lecture. One lecture, half and half. I think it'll probably take 2 or 3. So if we do 100 pages for the free half, or even I might even get through 100 pages because I'm taking so many notes. It's marked up like a freaking slow boy's paper turned in math class, right? It's marked up like freaking you failed, dude. It's probably going to take 3 or 4 lectures to get through this. And yeah, you got to love it when you happen upon just sort of synchronicity, providence, these really well done academic works. So before we get into the book, I did want to cover, we had a couple questions that popped up because I did a stream, I don't even remember how long ago it was, a year, 2 years, back when we had like an old Bitcoin crash. And somebody said, did you employ your same strategy as before? Yeah, I did, except I got a little smarter with it because at the time, I didn't know about cycles and markets. And I am not a registered financial advisor, so I'm not telling you what to do. Remember, everybody does this. Every YouTube channel, I'm not a registered financial advisor. We didn't think you were, but I know you have to say that. So I'm not telling you guys what to do, but I moved out of all the altcoins, basically. And the reason I did that was because, the market's going to move on the basis of Bitcoin. So as long as Bitcoin's tanking, there's really no reason to have altcoins. So the idea there is, well, then you want to wait until, I think Becker is right, that you want to wait until the market goes down to whatever you perceive to be the low. We're definitely at a low, but we can go lower. Bitcoin can go to 12, 14 or so, right? So what you want to do is, so the first thing I didn't know, as I said, was the cycles, right? Bitcoin and markets go in cycles. And I didn't really know a lot about taking profits. I mean, I'd heard about this and I thought, oh, that just means like you cash in when you're up high or something. No, what you want to do, and there's a great video that Ivan on Tech. Guys, welcome. Bitcoin. Pump. Guys, what's going on? This is Ivan on Tech. What is Bitcoin doing? Okay, put your big boy pants on. Not my fault if crash. Pump. Right? You guys know Ivan. Anyway, he has a good video on taking profits and dollar cost averaging and all those sort of practices. So, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I didn't know any of that, just sort of playing around. But you kind of go through stages of learning this kind of stuff, and you get better at investing and how to do this. And I'm no expert on this. I just, follow a lot of different analyses, try to come up with what the best strategy is. So basically, I just moved out of all of the altcoins, put everything into Bitcoin and Ethereum. And because we've kind of been in the sideway action for a long time, you can kind of play the little ups and downs. So like, if we're up a few $1,000s that day, take profits. And what you want to do is have a stash of, if you don't want to just be a long-term hodl and forget about it, one thing you can do is, like I said, you have this little stash, like a bag of like USDC, right? And then when you go up a few $1,000s, take your profits, is what I'm trying to say. Then have your little stash of USDC. Then when it drops back down, whenever you feel comfortable, you buy back in. So essentially what that's doing is just generating and accumulating for you. So it did look like we were going to have another big crash recently, and that's what I expected. Although I didn't wise up to this until my portfolio had crashed about 60 or 70%. So these are the kinds of things that help you wise up, right? So making these mistakes helps. So once we crashed, a few months ago? What has it been? 3 months? We crashed back down to pretty low. Let's see Bitcoin here. So 3 months ago, come on now. Yeah. 3 months ago, we were, we've had a couple crashes, I guess, haven't we? I guess we've had 2 crashes. So a year ago, we were getting up into the 60s. That's when we hit the peak. Should have been taking profits at that time. I wasn't wise enough yet. We crashed down to 36 or 8, and we went sideways at 38 to 40, whatever, for a few months. Then we had a big dump, and then we had another big dump, and then we've been in this bottom area of 18, 19 for the last 3 months. Yeah. And so when you're in this bottom area of the up and down, that's when you can play the little moves of short-term taking profits. But remember, I think I'm at such a loss this year that it's not really going to be a big deal to report, because reporting for taxes, you were going to report your gains and losses. Well, this was all a giant loss. So, like I said, 60, 70% to what it was at the beginning of the year. At the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So it's huge losses. Everything crashed though, because crypto's not yet its own independent market. You know what I mean? It's still kind of like wedded to all the other big macro markets, stock market and all that stuff. So no, it doesn't do its own thing yet. Maybe down the road, 10 years from now. But Bitcoin is still, of course, the world's hardest asset. And of course, we did have some bad news come out about Ethereum, unfortunately, which I think I shared that Substack article written a while back by, I forget that guy's name, but it's on my Twitter. And we found out that it looks like Klaus and company are eyeing Ethereum, right? They're very interested in Ethereum now. They put out a thing a couple years ago, remember, where they said we like Cardano, Stella, Solana, and I don't remember what else. And of course, the reasoning was they're all centralized, right? So that the Klaus and company said that a while back, but now they're saying, oh no, actually we like Ethereum now. And so the whole idea of it, because Ethereum is proof of stake and it's green, but it seems now to be basically oligarchic. So yeah, that makes me. I mean, I think you could still make money if Ethereum comes back up, which I think it will. Don't know when, but I don't think it's going to be great now for long term. Inflation. Well, it might work because it's supposed to be deflationary. Supposedly it's going to go into being deflationary. But again, I think the point is that, but if it's going to be able to be shut off, which is what we've seen in the past few months with some of the Ethereum applications, then it's not really decentralized, you see. And so it's now censorable. It's going to be, it might be Klaus coin, or at least they're interested in it. And it's kind of an oligarchy, right? And nothing's perfect, but Bitcoin at least is a lot better than that in terms of the fundamentals. So I would just say that, when you're in these local tops and bottoms that we have, and again, this is my strategy, so I'm not telling you what to do, but when we go up here, if you're up a few hundred or a few $1,000s, then you take a profit, and you're not going to do it perfect, right? So you do it roughly. As it's going up, you take profits, and then as it's going down, I buy in, you see. So let's say I timed this top right, and I'm up $1,000, right? So I don't cash out everything, but I take profits. So let's say I took 1K profit. And let's say Ethereum right here, let's just using it as an example, right? Ultimately, I would want to acquire more Bitcoin, not Ethereum, but I might use Ethereum as a vehicle to acquire more Bitcoin. So let's say that I had a couple of Ethereum here and I made $1,000. And so the Ethereum went up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cash that I stashed, right? Guess what? Ethereum drops in the next week or 2 weeks, right? And let's say right here, Ethereum was 2K. And let's say it drops down to 1K. And we're just using it as an example. Okay, well now, let's say I had 2 Ethereum and I took profits $1,000. And then it dropped down here to 1K. I'm going to take my 1K profit. I'm going to buy another Ethereum. So now I've got 3 Ethereum. And then in this next local movement, in the next week, guess what? We start to go back and we go back up to 2K. But now I've got three Ethereum and I'm up back up to 2K. But I'm going to take profits again. So let's say I take another $1,000 profit. These circles are my profits. Okay. So now I've taken $1,000 profit on Ethereum. And then we get another drop back down to Ethereum being 1K. Guess what I'm going to do? The same thing, right? So then I buy at the bottom. Now I've got 4 ETH. Now, isn't my goal here to only just have ETH? No, in fact, if you've noticed the last several months, the pattern is that Ethereum basically follows Bitcoin, but it was because of all the hype about the merge, it was actually at its almost highest ever trade against Bitcoin. So in other words, if you had accumulated Ethereum, when Ethereum got to its highest levels trading against Bitcoin, you could have gotten a good amount of Bitcoin. So let's say that I just am doing this to accumulate ETH, not for ETH itself, but because, I want to actually just buy Bitcoin. And so now I've got 4 ETH, and I take that 4 ETH and I get BTC. See? Now, maybe this isn't the whole portfolio, but maybe this is the money that I'm playing with, right? Now, this isn't foolproof either, because markets don't always necessarily do this kind of a thing. They may not. They may go up, down here, right? It may go down to $800, or they may go up. But neither of those is necessarily bad, because if it goes down, you're buying on the way down. See? It's that simple. If it rockets up, you're taking profits as it goes up. And you can determine what level or percentage of profits you want to take. There's no ironclad rules here. You just got to figure out what's best for you and what you can do. So that's what I've kind of been doing in the last several months, based on a lot of the research that I've done, listening to a lot of podcasts and, people that analyze and do it. I haven't really fooled with any alts except for Ethereum, just because it was so hyped up. Because remember that, when Bitcoin crashes 50%, 60%, all the altcoins are going to crash 70, 80, 90%. There's really no point in fooling with them yet, until we start to see, I think Becker's right about this totally. It's not that hard to figure out. Once you see Bitcoin rocketing up to like 30, 35, that's when is the sweet spot to know that, okay, now the alts are going to follow and rocket up in the next bear market, whenever that is. Now, things are pretty bad economically, so it may be a year or two before another bear market. In fact, if you remember, Bitcoin had that long sideways action. So everybody remembers the 2017 explosion when we went up to 19, right? So from December 2017, we had the $3,000 crash right after that for a long time, right? So February 2019, from 2017, 18 to 19, basically there was a year or more where you could have, there was half a year where you could have bought it at 6,000, another half of the year where you could have bought it at 3 or 4. And if I was smart, and if I understood the cycles back then, market cycles, which I didn't understand market cycles, what, and the halving and all that, it would have been a great time to accumulate, right? But also, I think there was a lot more uncertainty back then. We didn't really know exactly where everything was going. But what I'm saying is that if you had been accumulating, then by about August 2019, we jumped up to 10,000. And then we had sideways action from 7 to 10 for a long time, right? So basically what I'm saying is from early 2018 all the way until 2020, you had about a 2-year sideways action where you could have just been sitting there accumulating. Then, boom, explosive bull market. And then a lot of volatility, right? You guys can see what I'm talking about. See this time frame here of 2 years? Right here in this 2017 bump, bop, bop. Then you had 2 years to accumulate at this sideways action. Then you had this, right? Explosion. And now we're back to levels still above the 2-year sideways action. But what I'm saying is that we might now see 2 years of sideways action at this level. I mean, I have no idea. I'm just saying that's very possible given where we are. And then, if markets get better at the macro level, if we get to the next halving, if there's a new president that comes in that's, not an economic disaster nightmare like your boy Brandon, et cetera, then we might, any of those factors could play into a new rise in the market, bull market, et cetera, out of this bear market that we've been in. But again, who knows? We might have an economic collapse. Now, people say, what about economic collapse? Okay, well, if we have an economic collapse, out of the economic collapse in the future, that will be even better for Bitcoin. Not because Bitcoin will immediately go crazy in an economic collapse, but what I'm saying is that in the long term, that will just demonstrate how hard of an asset Bitcoin is. So it's like a no-brainer, right? I mean, all the problems are caused by the money printing. Brr, 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 right? The money printer goes brr. It's been going brr like crazy. Eventually, all that's going to come to a head and collapse at some point. And what's going to be left standing? Gold, silver, whatever assets, Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin will suffer in any kind of collapse, sure. But it's not going to go away unless the internet goes away or something like this, right? So we know this is the future. How long and how exactly that will play out, of course, nobody knows. But if you understand market cycles, which again, I'm not an expert in any of this, just kind of been following and studying this for the last several years, trying to learn more, and every day, actually, more and more into this every day. The simple strategy that I've discovered that I just kind of go by, and I don't do a lot of TA, I'm just looking at the local highs and the local lows. And I'm not taking profits on everything, right? I'm not taking like 100,000, I'll put everything in, right? I'll put everything I've got, and then I'm going to take profits on, let's say it goes up $10,000. I'm going to take $10,000. No. I'm just taking small amounts of profit a day or something like that. And then, like I said, let's say Ethereum goes up. Let's say I make $1,000 on the Ethereum I have in a day. I'm going to take profits in USDC, and we'll start building a USDC bag, right? Then when we go back down, I'm going to buy back in. It's just really that simple. But most people don't even think this. They think crypto is like, oh, you buy in to crypto on the release of the coin and then you make zillions of dollars and you cash out, which I guess some people do that. And I'm sure that, I mean, that's really probably the main point of all the shit coins. But when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum as a means of attaining Bitcoin, that's not what you're doing, right? You're not going to, I mean, you can wait 5 or 10 years if you want to for Ethereum to get to $20,000 or $50,000, or for Bitcoin to get to $1 million. But I mean, that's not coming anytime soon, right? So what my thought process was just simply, okay, let's take what we have and let this be a thing that kind of generates its own profits, take profits, buy in as we see dips, take profits as we see local highs, local tops. And then we just got a little machine basically that's generating its own accumulation. And then roll that over into the ETH or the Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is less volatile than Ethereum, right? So if you're wanting to have a little more risk, then you're going to do this profit-taking method with Ethereum to acquire more Bitcoin. But remember that doing it this way also carries the risk of Ethereum going down more than Bitcoin, you see. So like if Bitcoin goes up 4 or 5% in a day, then usually Ethereum, not always, but usually Ethereum will go up 7 or 8% in a day. If Bitcoin goes down 3 or 4%, Ethereum goes down 5, 6, 7, 8%, see. So there's more risk, more reward, but again, in the long term, I don't have a whole lot of hope anymore for Ethereum, given what we're seeing with like Klaus and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that seems to, again, just to be the simple little strategy that I've come up with for, and again, I'm not like some big day trader. Like I don't analyze these charts all day. I'm just looking for, when I log into the app, did we go up 5% today? Okay, that made a couple $1,000s. Okay, let's take profits on that. Okay, did we go down today? Okay, well, then let's take our little bag that we had at USDC and let's accumulate. So remember, you're accumulating on the way down, you're buying on the way up. It's that simple. But most people, unfortunately, who I guess don't know this or don't think about it, they think when it's going up, you buy it. No, you buy it when it's low, dummy. What? Right. And you don't do everything at once, right? You're taking profits on the way up and you're accumulating on the way down. That's simple. So that's the strategy that I've employed in the last, I don't know, 6-8 months since we had that the last two recent crashes. So we actually had two pretty bad crashes, right? There was the crash initially from 60 to 30, 40. And then we had the crash from that to 20, 18, 20. Yeah, there could be another crash. Yeah. So, but what are you going to do if it crashes? I'm going to buy more, dummy. What do you think? Like, what? I mean, this is, I know stocks work in a similar way in cycles and all that. I just can't really, and I have played around with a few stocks. So, but I bought some energy stocks, and that made a little bit of money for a little while. But I don't know. The stock market is just weird to me. I can't really figure that out. This seems to be a little more accessible. Maybe just because I'm a millennial age spur. I don't know, but stocks seem to go in a slower cycle, and it's, slower gains and it's slower losses. But I mean, used to all this volatility, right? You're used to waking up overnight and your portfolio crashed 60%. But if you think long term, it's not a big deal. You get over that. The main thing, I think, is to just not be that concerned with the day to day, other than if you're taking profits and accumulating on smaller amounts, not your whole bag, but smaller amounts. And to think long term, right? Because a lot of this is just like a psychology game. That's it. It's psychology, tactics, and tricks. And yeah, there's whales that buy in and buy out, manipulate. But if you just kind of play it safe in terms of accumulating and taking profits, it's not that bad. It's not that big of a risk. So to answer the various questions that came in via the video from Slowboy Whiteboard, that's basically the strategy I've taken. I'm not telling you what to do, but it does seem to work, at least for accumulating, here and there a little bit. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to accumulate masses of Ethereum or Bitcoin either, right? Because we're just talking about a few $1,000s taking profits. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, maybe you have that much money. I don't have that much money, but so that's all I want to do is create a little engine that's like generating the accumulation, right? Not necessarily to make dollars, but just to make stablecoin for me. It generates the stablecoin when I take profits. Then when we go down, you buy back in on the local tops. That's it. And then you do the same thing on big explosive cycles. So if we have a big bear market, then of course you're going to do the same thing, right? If Bitcoin goes from 20,000 to 50,000 in a week, you better be taking profits that week, and substantial profits, because that's a substantial thing, right? And why are we doing that? Is that because we're getting out of Bitcoin? No, we're doing that because we want a bag ready for the next drop. It's that simple. That's it. It's not it's not rocket science, and I'm not staring at charts all day. That's it. All right. So this isn't the crypto show, but I did think it was worth touching on that, because people have said, and I'm not really interested in alts as much, except that when we do start to see when Bitcoin gets back up to 30, 35, that's the time when you would employ some of your capital. Not everything. That's not my strategy. Maybe you do that. I don't know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some chunks, and I'm going to put a little chunk in Solana. I'm going to put a little chunk in, whatever else, Sandbox. I don't know, what metaverse coins, whatever else I think is going to go up. Not because I care about any of that crap, only because I'm going to let it go up, And then that's going to be a little engine for taking profits in the bear market. I'm sorry, in the bull market, excuse me. But in the bear market, no point, not even any point in messing with altcoins, in my view, right? Unless you're some sort of super expert TA trader person, which that's not me. But this has proven a much better method than speculating on shit coins in a bear market, which doesn't make any sense. Again, unless you're some sort of technical trader person, if that makes sense. So yeah, I would say watch guys. Watch Ivan's video. I'll give you guys this one on taking profits, and then I'll give you guys this. Because this is all we're doing here, right? It's not even that hard of a strategy. Well, now I can't find his video. He has a really popular video. Go. Not that one. It should be coming up. Like his top video should be like how to take profits, right? Guys, take profits. Number one thing in crypto. You guys take profits, or you will be with holding bags. Guys, who wants to be holding empty bags of shitcoin? Not anybody. You want to take profits. I do it pretty good, right, Ivan? Anyway, I can't find his video, but he has a super popular video on taking profits, Ivan on Tech. So let's see, crypto. Let's see if this is it. Taking profits strategy. He still doesn't come up. Why is he not coming up? Somebody find Ivan on Tech's taking profits strategy. And again, then you just roll your profits up into basically into Bitcoin. Again, my view, yes, Bitcoin is still supreme, the best. It's not going to be toppled, especially given the news has come out about Ethereum. But you could still utilize these as means of accumulating Bitcoin. That's it. So, long-term goal, Bitcoin is the best. Just accumulate that. And if you don't want to do this, then just hodl Bitcoin. You don't have to do any of this. Anyway, I can't find Ivan's video on taking profits, but and then BitBoy had a video on cycles. That's another important one that I saw in the last several months. It's understanding the market cycles is it? That's a really important, just basic thing to understand. And again, none of this is like super hardcore set in stone. It might not always go this way. We might get into a future where there's not 4-year cycles. Maybe it changes. But it's still good to understand these basics, which I didn't understand even a year ago when I was just throwing money around and, being dumb with trying to figure out which cryptos are going to make money. So again, yeah, these are the two things. Understand the 4-year cycles and the Bitcoin cycles, which just like stock market, there's cycles. And then understand taking profits, DCA, dollar cost averaging, accumulation. Those are the key things. That's it. All right. So hopefully that helps people. Because people were like, what are you doing with cryptos now? What are you doing now? You got crypto smashed. No. The bear market, guys, is how you make money. You don't make, you make money in the bull market, obviously, but the way that you make the money is by buying it cheap. It's not that hard. Who doesn't understand this? And a lot of people who were like, oh, I'm out of Bitcoin, dude. I'm out of this because it went down. I'm like, it go. What do you mean, dude? It goes down. Did you expect that it would go up forever and not go down? What did you expect, right? And, Fed coin, CBDC, obviously that's going to be some kind of creepy scam. Who's actually going to believe that or buy into that? The whole point of crypto is to avoid scams and fiat money. So on the one hand, maybe it will actually facilitate the growth of crypto inadvertently because more people will be adopting it, I guess. But who's gonna be so stupid as to fall for Fed coin or whatever? And I've heard that there's actually a struggle between FedCoin and CBDC, because FedCoin, right, if that was a government issued thing, there would be a struggle between that and the private banks trying to issue coins. So banks don't necessarily want a central bank currency. That would be problematic for them. I mean, private banks, I'm saying. But then again, of course, yes, the Federal Reserve actually is a private bank. But all right, let's get into the Milner-Fabian conspiracy, Johann Ratiu, or we'll never get through this. I'll just ramble about crypto until your ears fall off. And we don't want that. Nobody wants their ears falling off. Okay, we're not a bunch of Vincent van Goghs in here. Vincent van Gogh. Did you know that that's how you're supposed to pronounce it? Vincent van Gogh. You're supposed to at the end of that OH. Gogh. Vincent van Gogh. Right? That weirdo was cutting off his ear because he's a goth boy. He's an emo goth boy. Socialism is the transition from democracy to dictatorship. Wow. Great insight on the very first part of the page here in Johann's book. He says, look, the whole history of this kind of stuff with socialism was a movement against the existing order, which was itself revolutionary. And the idea was, since liberal democracy had already overthrown monarchy, aka church and monarchical state, it's just the next form of liberalism that emerges out of liberal democracy or republicanism. I think that's a good argument, and so often, we don't hear people understanding this. Really, there's only a handful of people. There's the Russian statesman guy, Pabianatsev. There's St. John of Kronstadt. There's Servando Gonzalez's book, Psychological Warfare in the New World Order. And there's Johann Ratiu. They're about the only ones that I can think of that understood. I'm sure there were some other monarchist writers who understood this, but they're like the only ones that I can think of that understood that, no, this was actually a move against church and monarchy. So the revolution doesn't begin with Marxists. The revolution begins with capital and the merchant class. French Revolution, right? French Revolution is the merchant class rejecting the nobility, the land nobility, etc., and church and state, right? And so he makes this argument that the only way to really understand this is to understand the longer patterns, the longer term analysis, which, by the way, Marx actually did understand, because Marx understood that. He thought that the movement out of landed nobility and feudalism to Enlightenment, Adam Smith, David Ricardo, John Locke, etc., that's a revolution phase one. And Marx says, all I'm doing is revolution phase two, which is the movement to socialism. And his argument was that the revolution simply hadn't gotten rid of everything yet. So liberal democracy, capitalism, Adam Smith is a step towards his science of revolution, he says, right? Because he believed it was a scientific socialism. He says that's all it necessarily coming. It's a deterministic thing, and the phases will absolutely play out. But as Ratiu argues, actually monarchy is really the true democracy. Monarchy is really the true government of the people because they're represented by a family of their own. But monarchy was not amenable to the merchant money power, right? For various reasons. Because it put limits on the attainment of capital. So, Karl Marx thought, well, socialism will have to be something that engages in revolutionary action. In fact, revolutionary action is fundamental to Marxism, socialism. And Ratiu begins the book by saying, this is really just why there's so much bloodshed. Marxism, socialism is proven by the 20th century's democide. right? Governments killing tens, if not 100 million people in the 20th century. There's different figures, and who knows which of those figures is correct. But most bloody century, 20th century, is the century of socialism, fascism, communism, Marxism, and monopoly capitalism sort of wreaking havoc. Socialism saw, according to Ratiu early on, through Marx, saw early on that subversion and infiltration and media control would be key to the success of his revolution, and particularly Red Terror. Red Terror would be necessary, and so we have examples that Ratiu mentions of the Paris Commune. There was also terror in Germany, apparently, in the 1800s. And Red Terror was something advocated by Lenin and Trotsky. Of course, their argument was, well, but every government engaged in terror, so we're just doing what anybody else would do and must do. Lenin advocated for the erecting of a Cheka, which would be a state police to basically enforce state terror. So that was intended to be a terrorizing force. Mao also continued this policy of utilizing terror, and I think it's mentioned all the way up into recent times with the Baader-Meinhof, Italian Red Brigades, etc. Marcus Wolf, who probably many people have heard of. I think he's pretty well known. I think he's one of the later East German intelligence people, and I guess he had some connection to Baader-Meinhof. Yeah, East Germany's Marxist intelligence officer Marcus Wolf, the Italian Red Brigade, etc. So this is a policy that has continued, and apparently was even utilized by other groups influenced by or infiltrated or subverted by Marxist Red Revolutionaries, such as the IRA. And I'm aware that there's false flags that were used there too, so I'm not trying to be overly simplistic here. But even the Scottish a lot of these nationalist parties at this time became these sort of socialist movements. Scottish National Party, for example. And the idea was, early on, of course, in Marx, everybody knows, the idea was to create a classless society. But does a classless society benefit only Marxism? Are there other powers and entities that could benefit from a classless society? And by extending that argument out, well, what about the loss of all the other identities? Couldn't certain powers other than just Marxism benefit from no identities at all? And I'm speaking of it in every sense. Too much your pee and your vajaja, right? Gumby people. Not just a classless society, but a giant Gumby people. A massive Gumby people. Well, I wonder who could benefit. Oh, monopoly capital, you see. Monopoly capital also benefits from a clone army of Gumby people. Then he gets into some of the personal characteristics of Marx. A lot of times we forget to, we look over sort of Marx himself, his past. All the time people say, have you read Richard Wurmbrand's book, Marx and Satan? Yes, I read it a long time ago. Yes, I'm familiar with many of the Marxist revolutionaries' flirtations with atheism, Satanism, flirtations with Satanism, and typically outright atheism for the most part, it seems. They could be Satanists, I don't know. But, Marx had these poems dedicated to Satan and this kind of stuff when he was young. But Ratiu doesn't mention that, but he goes into contradictions. So Marx would actually contradict himself at times because, remember, Marxism is like a system-building project. So it was a thing that was always in progress, right? And Marx himself would argue this. He would just sort of change the system to fit the time, to fit the case, to fit what was needed at the time. And in fact, he, in many cases, contradicted himself. One of those, for example, that Ratiu mentions is the absurd contradictions of a classless society, for example. Because there's not really a classless... No, you can't have a society where everybody's equal. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, who is so dumb as to actually believe this? Because in the Marxist society, the inner party elite of Marxism are the people above the law. So they're the elite class. I mean, it's a totally elitist thing, obviously. And how can you have a classless society when certain powers use force and coercion? Okay, well then they have a power that not everybody else has. So it's not classless, right? I mean, the guardian class, the secret police class is a class of their own, duh. And really it's just kind of like Plato's Republic. You've got the philosopher elite, which is, I guess, Marx and his goofuses sitting around, supposedly. And then underneath them, the secret police guardian class, and then they police the proles. But Marx said, oh no, this is scientific governance. It's all science, you see. So remember, the baloney that we have today of propaganda out there, that everything that's put forward by the establishment is science, right? Peer-reviewed, fact-checked. Scientific governance was what Marx claimed for all of his crackpot stuff. And not only that, scientific governance led Marx to have affinities with what would later become technocracy. Everything is a number, an equally calculable unit in a vast chain of collectivized, calculated units, you see. Marxism is supposed to be caring for the needs of the people, but Marx also said that Marxism would require ruthless, hard-hearted, calculated, basically killers to run it. So this, Ratiu says, is just Orwellian doublethink. Ultimately, then, what we see is a system-building project where the system is unfalsifiable. In other words, if you argued against Marxism, you would be vilified as bourgeoisie. Oh, you're just making that argument because you're bourgeoisie, which is a fallacy, by the way, right? So notice that it's operating on fallacies. But the whole system is operating on slogans and fallacies. That's it. And this is where we will see, by the way, because the end goal of all this, as we know, where we are today, as we get up to, Klaus and to Davos, right? We're not in a Marxist system. So this is where we have to be very precise and very clear that today's global governance and et cetera that they're pushing isn't classical Marxism. It's not even really identical to socialism, but it's a kind of hybrid. And that's the key to understand here. And we do need to know this, because if we just go around like a lot of boomers do and say, well, the Marxists and the commies, it's not really getting at the engine behind all of this. The engine behind all of this are the Fortune 100 and the monopoly capitalists, who have an alliance with a love for socialism. And we're going to be precise in this book and identify exactly who and what kind of socialism that we're talking about. Because it's not classical Marxism, it's Fabianism. That's the key here. That's what this book is about. This is the socialism that succeeded Marx, that was much more effective, much more ideologically powerful, due to what he will call, what the Fabians called permeation. Permeation is the George Bernard Shaw, Beatrice Webb, and the other guys at the Fabian Society's idea of infiltration, subversion of all the existing institutions, probably somewhat similar to Gramsci's long march through the institutions, and alliance with liberal capital. So again, let's understand that the Fabians were more successful because they understood and borrowed from an early Marx strategy. Later Marx, maybe you didn't say this, but early on we're going to notice some funny things about Marx, because most people understand that Marxism is against liberal democracy, not the Fabians. The Fabians thought the best approach is not a overnight revolution, because the workers are not going to drop their lunch pails and their canteens and go grab a bunch of swords and overthrow the Commissioner Gordon or whoever, the worker man walking on the steel beams is concerned with whether he's going to drink his canteen and eat his, hearty man soup for lunch. That's what he's thinking about. He's not listening to, he didn't know anything about highfalutin jibber jabber of economic theory of who owns the means of production, right? They don't know anything. They didn't care about that. By the way, that was something, that whole thing, that was actually Marx borrowed that from the Fabians, ironically. From the Manchester School, I think Marx ripped that off. But turns out Marx actually was engaged in a lot of plagiarism and ripping off of stuff, according to Ratiu. So he's not actually this, original thinker who was just sort of sitting there in libraries and studying language and economics all day, and vomited out this supposed scientific masterpiece of economic theory or whatever. So the idea of quantification, then, Ratiu says, is what leads us to the Orwellian notion of a collectivist socialist state. The idea here being that the state becomes all-encompassing and all-powerful because it must, by the logic of the system, enforce the equality. But there's not any clear idea or formula as to what exactly counts as equality. And this is why we see the absurdity of this system when it's actually put into play is so destructive, because it's just preposterous. Like, I mean, if I have, let's say, a skill that somebody else doesn't have, well, then we're not equal. So then I shouldn't exercise or use my skill, because I might be in danger of, being bourgeoisie or better than somebody. You see how silly this is, right? Likewise, as we know, what's the motivation to work if I lazily do my job versus working hard to get ahead? There's no motivation for that, right? Because there isn't any getting ahead. Everything is so-called equality. There's also a lot of fallacies that are used that we're going to look at too, that Ratiu points out. One of the fallacies, of course, is that socialists often would say, well, capitalism produces these abusive structures, industrialist structures, especially in the Industrial Revolution, where you got basically little dirty chimney sweeps, working 50 hours a day, right? Little Bob Cratchit over there having to, scrub out chimneys and toilets all morning. And what does he get for lunch? He gets a scrap of he gets a giblet of Dobby, right? He gets a little piece of, please sir, could I have some more Dobby? He gets a little bit of orphan slop. Please sir, could I have some more? And then you die the next week because you're malnourished. Now that was obviously abusive, but the abuse of capital is not the same thing as everything in capitalism must be thrown away or done away with because it's abusive, because this is a fallacy. In other words, if a system must be discarded because there's abuses, then that would undercut socialism, because socialism has abuses, as every socialist would admit. Oh, so well then it must be done away with because it's abusive. This is silly. It's a fallacy, right? Fathers are abusive, so we should get rid of dads. Now, some of today's social justice crazies, they actually would say, oh yeah, we should. Correct. Right? Like the crazy vegans, right? Suffering is bad, so we should get rid of all the beings that are sentient, and then there won't be suffering anymore. I mean, how dumb is this? Is just insane, right? This is why if you don't follow logic, if you believe fallacies, you will go insane. You will enact insane things. I mean, and you think it's, no, you're just being silly. No. I mean, in North Korea, you got to have the same haircut. Don't you have to have the same haircut as the leader? Because if I have long hair, is that bourgeoisie, right? I mean, what if I'm 6 feet 6 inches and you're 6 feet 1 inch? Should I have my ankles cut off because I'm better at you than other things? That's not. I'm a bourgeoisie height. And then it gets absurd because what if you get a dictator who's, 4 feet tall? Uh-oh, now everybody's got to get their calves cut off, right? Because everybody's got to be 4 feet tall. Now, you think that's crazy, but it's actually not, because like in Pol Pot's thing, if you could read, you were bourgeoisie. Reading and doing academic stuff, oh, that's bourgeoisie. You need to die, dude. You see how crazy this is. But is it just pure random craziness, or is there a method to the madness? Anyway, but before we get to the method to the madness, Ratiu talks about how Marx plagiarized. He gives several examples of earlier theorists that he plagiarized from. One of these was plagiarized the Communist Manifesto from a work called Principles of Socialism, the Manifesto of Democracy in the 19th Century, written 5 years earlier by Victor Considerant. I didn't actually know this. And this is something that Sutton wrote about in the 90s, I guess, before Professor Sutton passed away. I haven't read everything from Professor Sutton, so I didn't know this. And, I had a lot of Marxist classes and grad school classes on Marx. And we got pretty deep into Marx and, had covered critical things as well. But I don't remember this issue of him ripping stuff off coming to light. But I'm not surprised, right? I mean, Ratiu goes on to mention other intellectual fraudulent elements with Marx, dealing with his claims that his stuff was scientific. Of course, there's no way to scientifically prove this elaborate system, which didn't even exist yet, right? But I guess Marx thought, well, when my prophecies come to pass, you will see that it is scientific. But just titling it scientism, or calling it scientific, which is everything we see today, is precisely enough in many cases to dupe pseuds and pseudo-intellectuals. That's precisely why Marxism had quite a bit of impetus behind it. Calling it scientific socialism was enough to, for example, entice the playwright George Bernard Shaw, who will play a key role in our book today, because he is one of the key players as a writer, as a propagandist, tract writer, subversive, obviously not necessarily on the money side, but more on the brain side for Fabianism. The one parallel that Ratiu notes that I noticed is that in that time, in the 1800s, right, 1840s, 50s, 60s, up in the 90s, their moral, their virtue signaling was to call anybody bourgeoisie. And by the way, this is popular again now, ironically, which now it's kind of funny. It's kind of like a meme-ish thing on the internet. Oh, yo, you being bougie over there. Oh, you going over to Baskin Robbins and you not getting the dollar menu ice cream that's going to give you diarrhea? You bougie. Getting that bougie ice cream. You going to the downtown cabaret to get your licks on? Get them licks? That's bougie. Even the rappers are talking about being bougie. But what's funny is that at this time, bougie was like today's N-A-S-E-E. Nasi. You see the parallel, right? So at that time, the Marxists would just call everybody bourgeoisie. Oh, you're bourgeoisie. You're making arguments against me. That's because you're bourgeoisie. So it's unfalsifiable as a system. You can't criticize it because all criticisms come from the money class. That was their argument, and this works just like it works nowadays. So, again, parallels, and I would imagine probably it's just as fake then as it is now, in the sense that it's not fake in the sense that there aren't a lot of people duped by this stuff, but nowadays it almost seems even more evident that there's just rich goobers, devious rich goobers behind the dum-dums. Okay, everybody knows about stuff in the last few years, and it all came out that was just a bunch of money given to them, certain groups, by very wealthy people, and all that money got stolen and ripped off, and it was all a bunch of fraudulent stuff. Well, shocker. Guess what? It was the same in the 1850s. Now, here's something I didn't really know, which was the history of the Labour Party. And if I recall, though, because I don't really care or know that much about British politics, but Quigley actually does, I think, cover this. And he covered it because it was the Rhodes, Rothschild, Milner group, Cliveden, Sett, Astors, Balfour, Curtis, Cecil, Lord Grey, all these people that we listed in the previous Quigley installments. These are the ones, really the power and the force and the impetus behind all of this success of socialism through Fabianism. Fabianism is, quote, reformed Marxism, as we'll see. And I didn't know that Fabians set up the Labour Party. That the Labour Party in the UK was established with the explicit intent to be the means covertly by which the United Kingdom would be converted to Fabianism. Period. And that there would be a series of plans and techniques, strategies, and models throughout the 20th century by which it's not just the Labour Party, guys. It's not just the Labour Party. Guess what? There's a fake right wing and a fake left wing. How long have I been saying that? So you can have these fake right wingers, Tory, whatever, and you can have the fake left wing of the Fabians. And guess what? It's the same people behind both. For what? For the same end goal of the conversion of not just the United Kingdom, but particularly here we're just talking about the United Kingdom through the Labour Party, there's a whole bunch of these. So they just set up all these British economic community, there's a whole bunch. We'll get to it in a minute, but chiefly the ideological locus of this is the London School of Economics. London School of Economics was founded to be a Fabian outlet for producing Fabian ideologues. Which, little interesting side note, didn't Mick Jagger or one of the Rolling Stones go to the London School of Economics? Pretty sure I read that somewhere. I don't remember where, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But the Fabians are key. And by the way, there's other entities established outside of UK as well. One of these would be Sweden's Social Democratic Party, as well as Norway's Labour Party. Now, these were from the 1930s to the 1970s. Other Labour parties and Social Democrat parties were set up. An early Fabian Marxist, Tryggvi Lie. Never heard of Tryggvi Lie, but Tryggvi Lie was sort of an operative in the sense of being one of these individuals to do this in Sweden or Norway, wherever Tryggvi is from. I'm guessing he's the Social Democrat guy in Sweden. But immediately what Fabians and Socialist Labour Party people would begin to lobby for and argue for was this idea that society needed to move away from being, quote, stupid, ignorant, backward, reactionary, and other such pejoratives, capitalist, to being fair, open society, basically. And the idea here was, get this, and I remember reading this in Che. I read a Che essay a long time ago. And I'm not saying Che was connected to Fabians. I'm just saying that Che had this essay where he talks about the new man. He basically takes the stuff from the Gospels and he's like, what Jesus was really talking about was what I'm talking about, which is the creation of a new man. The new man is the collective man. So just the opposite of Nietzsche's new man. Nietzsche's Übermensch is the world historical individual. Here, the new man is appropriated to be the collective new man. All of society is the new man. And the Fabians love this idea. They thought that was so cool. But so they were doing this idea of new man way before. And probably Marx said this too. I don't remember if Marx specifically said that the new man would be a collective man. I don't know. But it got wedded to that and to social Darwinism. Social Darwinism would play a key role because Marx thought that scientific socialism was just basically Marxism, and it was identical to social Darwinism, but in Marx's system, and he dedicated, I can't remember if it was some other writing, or maybe Das Kapital, or he dedicated one of these books to Darwin. And he was really just trying to wed his stuff to, it's scientific like Darwin, well, everything I'm saying, and so it's going to happen, right? You're going to evolve to the phases of, it goes from feudalism, to capitalism, liberal democracy, which gives way to socialism and revolution, which gives way to big state communism, socialism, big state communism, which gives way to, in Marx's idea of the withering away of the state and the libertarian end goal. Yes, you heard me right. Marx's view is, in the long term, libertarianism. Marx believes that the state can, will, and must wither away. That's the final stage of Marxism. Now this gets into where, was he a utopian? And the Marxists love to debate all day long. Well, he wasn't really utopian. Nobody was, but he wasn't. I think Marx, and the reason for this debate is because Marx wasn't really consistent. Marx would change his views, and he would even say, I have a scientific view, but science is open to revision. So my system is open to revision over time. And so and this is where we get a debate between, in the Marxist camps, diamat and histmat. Dialectical materialism and historical materialism. Anyway, that's not what we're interested in for today's purposes. So, and I've talked about that in the past on other podcasts for years. I'm not going to go into that again, but unfortunately, these revolutionaries early on, we're talking about the first phase. So he's going to go into, Marx being influenced by Hegel, turning Hegel on his head. We all know that. Hegel's philosophy of the right gets flipped on its head. Early on, Marx called for genocide. Everyone that is not part of the social revolution must perish, the early Marxists said. And again, this makes sense given that it's combined with read Terror. Ratiu gives the example of this is most likely what led to, anywhere from 20 to 60 million dying in Russia. People estimate 70 million for Mao. And then I was not familiar. I think Quigley talks about this, but I've forgotten about it. There was a whole other thing called the Morgenthau Plan for Germany. And I totally forgot this, or I didn't know about this, or remember this. But he says the Morgenthau Plan led to the death of millions in Germany. Then he talks about how some of these strategies continue into today's elite. But it would be wrong to think that today's elite are identical to just straight up Marxists. Because remember, this is an evolving system. It's a system that can morph into what it needs to be at the time, especially under the Fabians. And that's why the Fabians are so key, so crucial to understanding what is the ideological backbone to where we are now. Now, does that mean that if you were to go to the Fortune 100 CEOs and say, sir, or excuse me, ma'am, because they're all ladies now, right? They're all women. Excuse me, girl boss, are you leaning in as a Fabian socialist? I highly doubt any of them even know what Fabian socialism is. So it doesn't mean that everybody's secretly part of some Fabian socialist secret society. We're looking at the ideological trends in the West that really had momentum to capture the minds and hearts of people for socialism throughout the late 1800s and into the 1900s. That's what we're getting at. And the key point will be that this form of socialism is much more open to liberal democracy and big capital. That's the key. And this, again, is why this research is so amenable to the research of Quigley and Sutton. Well, for one, it's basically what Quigley says in the whole book. And it's exactly what Sutton's research is all about. Again, which we just covered at the members section at my site and also over on my Rockfin. Let's see. What does he come to next? Next, he starts to talk about the thesis that Marxism was always really an inner elite group of these sort of layabouts, these sort of yapping, lazy philosophy people. And I can say I come from philosophy. My background is philosophy. You know, I went to not to high school. I went to college. I went to high school with a bunch of layabouts. I love that word. I went to college with a bunch of layabout Marxists. And basically, a lot of these people were suits. They were lazy. I'm talking about the ones that explicitly affirm Marxism. Some of them were pretty intelligent, actually. They were smart people. They read a lot. But they just kind of laid around and just kind of philosophized and had no real world experience because all the Marxists in college work at frickin' Chipotle, right? Chipotle, as the boomers say, right? Or they work at the frickin' gas station or the liquor store. Talking about the students, right? But I mean, no real world experience, no knowledge of economics, just pure theory that they just sit around on a couch and bullshit about. Okay? That's the average college Marxist. And those are the guys that become the professors, you see. Okay, so we're not talking about, you know, genius movers and shakers here for most of these people. We're just talking about layabouts. Okay. But layabouts need financial backers, and so this is where he gets into the next section, pointing out that, yeah, really, I mean, these layabouts are just used by cunning rich people. That's what this amounts to, right? Not every rich person likes socialism, Marxism. Not saying that, but very, very wealthy, very cunning and devious, wealthy people are happy to utilize revolutionary dupes, retards, and slow boys. That's what we're saying here. Layabouts. You a damn layabout. And Ratiu reminds us, as we should keep in mind, that capitalism is revolutionary. It's not the phase of revolution that, you know, Marx and Huxley talk about, the later phases, the final phase, the final revolution. But it is a revolutionary force against church and state. Does that mean church and state was perfect? No. But remember, we can't fall into the fallacy of because something is abused, it needs to go away. All these dumb Marxists and the socialists and I mean, I just think back to my time on campus, right? Because I was typically, you know, conservative, trad, paleocon-minded student on campus when I was in college. And I would always argue and debate with all the atheists. By the way, when I see the clips of campuses now, it's like 10 times worse than it was in the 2000s when I was there. I mean, it's like meta crazy level beyond. But it was bad back then. And you would have these debates with these people on campus about whatever, Marxism, socialism, theism, atheism, whatever you're debating. And it's really evident that these people have no idea what they're talking about. But that they would always be really active in terms of being recruited into various causes. Okay, I'm not talking about recruited into like intelligence recruitment. I'm talking about, oh, you need to come work for, I don't know, whatever society, whatever liberal activism, right? So they're into, and that's part of Marxism actually, is the importance of action. Activism in Marxist theory is as important as theory. And a lot of the Marxists, they would later call this praxis, right? Marx would say, if you're not engaged in action and praxis, you're not a real Marxist, this kind of stuff. So in other words, it's a system where you basically just get some of this dumb slogans and ideas, and then you just go out and you march and you repeat the slogans. I mean, it's really dumb, but that's how it works. On the ground, that's how it works. But remember, the Reds, the Bolsheviks, the Socialists, the Fabians, Karl Marx himself, all these people always had financial backing. Okay, and what this shows is that this is not an organic thing. Okay, this is not a bunch of, a dude that's just a head on a skateboard begging for money, right? Like you see in the in the subway or whatever, just no body, just a head, or no legs, just a head. That's not where Marxism gets its money, right? It's not a throw some money in the canteen. The can, please, and help me start my movement of change. So it's not organic, is the point we're trying to say. And he points out some interesting other references that I'd never heard about, as we'll see in a moment, about early Marx and his influences and funding. And this came about through influential liberal money power, liberal democracy magazines, which again is allied with money power. And this is the figure, liberal banker Camphausen was the first commoner to hold a post under Prussian King Frederick William IV. And Camphausen began to implement transition away from monarchy to a constitutional monarchy, which is just a liberal move. Maybe, I think that there should be some kind of constitution. But I'm saying that at that time, that was seen as a liberal move. And then this guy, I think, is the one that goes on to, start some kind of magazine. So, the liberal banker Camphausen. I don't remember the name of the magazine. Maybe on a different page. But this is, Marx gets into these circles of Lib Dems, liberal Democrats, right? And what's funny is that early Marx said, let's just use these guys, right? And it's ironic because we think of the Cold War, Marxism, Stalinism, they're very anti-democrat, anti-democracy, right? But it's funny because early stage Marx was like, nah, dude, let's ally with these Lib Dems. Marx changes that view and becomes against the liberal Democrats when he thinks that, no, it's time for a straight up hardcore revolution. And these people are wussies, right? These people are the red pussies, so to speak. The Fabians continue that early idea. No, actually, we should be open to anybody who's allied with us. So the Fabians they retain the early policy of Marx to be open to Lib Dem, liberal democracy, and not against them. Now, there's this early Marxist movement. I don't think I remember this. The Blomquist dictatorship. Had you guys heard of this? You remember this? Let's see what this is. Blomquist gave a speech following, as it did, the conspiratorial line of Auguste Blanqui, who joined the Communist League that year, advocated revolution by a small group to seize power and establish a dictatorship to impose a new order. However, the address was not by Blomquist. It was entirely in line with Marx and Engels' very own manifesto and writings which they published in 1848. It clearly showed that Marx and Engels planned a revolutionary coup by a tiny non-working clique. So he's just pointing out another contradiction in the early phase of Marxism, where early on Marx thought, oh, we got a guy here, well, let's have a coup right now. And apparently that didn't work. This exposes a very elaborate international scheme to stage a revolution within a revolution. This is great. This is key. So the idea here is that the Lib Dem revolution is actually a front for, according to what Marx thought, his real revolution. In the first phase, the liberal Democrats would come to power and they would eliminate the conservative monarchy. Then there would be installed a liberal democratic government. And for Marx, a second phase where a parallel socialist revolution would then remove the Lib Dems and bring a socialist revolution to power. This would pave the way for Marx and Engels then, and their own communist league, which is a kind of his own little secret society, to install their new government. Thus, we can see, according to Ratiu's analysis, from the very outset, Marxism is bound up with the notion of highly deceptive concentric circles of secret societies, inner cores, and being highly deceptive. And this was already key in play in Marxism by 1850. Also, he says that people around Marx that knew him and Lenin as well, these were, quote, liars and intriguers. These were perfidious and sly men. So these were not virtuous, noble men that, they're portrayed as in the propaganda. Then we begin to see some patterns that are quite curious when these revolutions early on didn't really work out. The 1849, German authorities were not stupid. They realized the subversive nature of this plot. They clamped down on Marx and Engels and smashed the Cologne division of Marx's secret society, the Communist League. Some of its members were put on trial. Others were scattered. This led to the German Communist League being disbanded in 1852. However, authorities were not ultimately able to prevail against international socialism because of their liberal capitalist backing. In the 1860s, Marx and Engels' co-conspirators Wilhelm Liebknecht and August Bebel were able to set up a socialist party which in the following decades was able to play a key role in the gradual conversion of Germany into socialism. Interesting. So they were actually successful in the long term in the 1800s in Germany. Meanwhile, here's the key point that we want to get to here. Meanwhile, the Communist League's principal leaders, Marx and Engels, were safely back at home in England. We're going to find that to be a curious pattern. Why are we always going back and hiding out in perfidious Albion? Here they were out of the reach of the German government, and here they were safe to continue their, quote, revolutionary work. Wonder why it's England. All right, then he goes on to talk about other internationals that were set up and organized, and then he begins to mention some of the big money involved in these. J.P. Morgan comes to the fore here in terms of the Communist League being set up in New York. So there was a Communist League affiliate set up in New York. This became a stronghold of liberalism and Marxism, and inevitably the source of finance for the Communist League's leadership. Money was coming in through the Morgan-associated Roosevelt clan. Interesting. So the first establishment of Marxism in New York as one of its Communist League secret society affiliates, franchised, J.P. Morgan and Roosevelt money. England also had its own socialist-oriented movements, one of which was, I'd never heard of this, called Chartism. This comes out of the Manchester School, and this is a school from which Karl Marx drew direct inspiration. In fact, apparently ripped some of his ideas off. Never heard of the Manchester School or Chartism. It may be in Quigley, I just don't remember. By the way, welcome you guys. If you're enjoying this Thursday night long stream, we got almost 400 here covering the Milner-Fabian conspiracy, getting into the depths, the intrigues and espionage in Fabian socialism and classical Marxism. And if you would leave a super chat, if you'd like to ask me a question, super chats are done through the Streamlabs link. So Streamlabs is below. And by the way, I noticed it looks like Streamlabs has enabled this new thing, Streamlabs OBS, called Collab Cam. This is great news because, as everyone knows, it is a nightmare to try to live stream interviews. It just does not work through Zoom, and it always causes sound problems. And no matter how many times I get the stupid plugin re-download it and the patch, it just screws up and farts out, and it doesn't work. So the last two interviews that we did, of course, with Tristan, you couldn't hear him. So then I was just recording the interviews and not doing them live. But it looks like Collab Cam is the solution to this. So basically, Streamlabs OBS has their own version of Zoom, and now all I have to do is just give people a link, and they can somehow join through Streamlabs. Thank you. Finally, a solution. I can't imagine that I'm the only person that was having this ridiculous problem. And everybody's like, oh, just switch over to PC. Dude, I've been using Mac now. I switched from PC to Mac 6 years ago. And to start all over and switch back to I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So if you just wait long enough, there'll be some patch or something. So this thing hopefully will work. So now we don't even have to use freaking stupid ass Zoom calls anyway. I'll just give people this link. We'll test it out with Jamie to make sure it works before we do it. I'm not going to test it on a live stream, but thankfully that finally we'll be able to do live streams just with a guest from OBS. That's awesome. So thank you, OBS, and hopefully it works. Let's see here. I'm going to skip some of these other internationals, right? There's Lenin's second international. There's the third international. The goal, however, by the 1850s of the revolution, the revolution is directed out of London by the 1850s, seeking a European-wide socialist revolution. By the 1850s, out of London, the Marxists are intending to implement European-wide socialist revolution. And how is this how did they do this? How is this so successful? Well, one of these was the establishment of the Labour Party in the UK. Now, the Labour Party is just for the conversion of the UK to this, right? European Union will be a key for how to convert the entire EU to this. The Labour Party would be established precisely for the explicit purpose to do this in the UK through the implementation of Fabianism. And Ratiu makes the point that if Marx really wanted to help the working people, it was not to work with big capital. Why would he be working with monopoly capital if he really wanted to help the people? Wouldn't he go back to what the workers wanted at this time? The Luddites? Did the Luddites, why were they mad about the textiles and the machines and the industrialization? Because it was taking away their jobs, right? Well, then wouldn't the logical move to have been to go back to what was prior to the Industrial Revolution, the monopoly capitalists? No. According to Marx, the thought was, no, move towards allying with big capital. Thus, Marx praises capitalism. And I've said this for years, and everybody's sort of mystified when I say this. What? Especially the libertarians. They go crazy when they hear this. Deer in the headlights. What? What are you talking about? Marx was not against capitalism. Did you not know this? Marx thought capitalism had these problems and these abuses, but that it was a necessary phase in the scientific phases of history. And Marx recognized, even before, remember guys, we talked about this in H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells called out his fellow idiot Marxists by saying, guys, we don't have to be against capitalism. Capitalism is the engine like no other engine that will build the global infrastructure. Capitalism will erect the infrastructure according to, and I didn't even realize this was in Marx, or if I did realize this, I forgot. I had my Marx undergrad and grad classes a long time ago. Okay, this is like 2005, 6, 7. So a lot of this I don't remember. But Marx praised capitalism because of its, number one, revolutionary origins. It was a phase out of medieval feudalism and monarchy, and it was able to bring forth the setting in Marx's mind for the revolution to socialism. So that was his logic, is what I'm trying to say. But Ratiu makes the point that Marx's revolution from the outset was never concerned with what was good for workers. Marxism, in fact, is naturally pro-state capitalism. In fact, Lenin used the principles of mass production that the capitalists developed. And if you guys have watched that movie that we've talked about for many years, I think Jamie and I did an analysis of it, Branded. If you remember that Russian movie, at the beginning, the guy who works in advertising and mass media, they're like, well, how did you learn your strategies of mass media? He says, for capitalism, he says, by Lenin. They're like, what? And well, where did Lenin learn it? From Taylorism and Ford. Taylorism and Ford had a huge influence on Lenin. And that makes perfect sense, of course, because although Henry Ford was not a Bolshevik, Henry Ford was a big fan of socialism, as I'm sure everybody knows. Ford, of course, was not so anti-Bolshevik that he didn't do business with Bolsheviks. I don't know if you guys knew this. All you 4chaners out there, did you know that Henry Ford did a lot of business with the Bolsheviks? In fact, he supplied the Bolsheviks with trucks and cars. Capitalist monopolists like Ford could look forward to doing great brisk business with the new socialist regime in Russia. Britain's Labour Party was demanding that the UK government give loans to the Bolsheviks. Well, there you go. Thus, Ratiu says, socialism is a form of monopoly capitalism. And once you grasp that, everything makes sense. Does it really matter if it's the CEO of Pepsi over here and his Pepsi thing, or if it's Kim Jong-il over here and his thing over here? I mean, don't you see that they're kind of the same? What's the big difference between state capitalism and socialism? I don't really see the difference. Socialism and monopoly capital are the same, Ratiu concludes. And that's pretty much been our thesis, my thesis, for as long as I can remember. Even when I was taking my undergrad Marxist praxis history Frankfurt School classes and grad classes. Even in those classes, mainstream university classes, my Frankfurt School trained professor was saying Marxism isn't anti-capitalist. This is a mistake, people think. This is a misunderstanding. It's a propaganda basic bitch misunderstanding. In fact, Marxism could never have worked if it had not had select big money capitalist interest behind it. So that's the normal university course information that you get. So I learned this in undergrad and grad school, and then I am out here in the world of internet arguing and debating with people, and people have never heard this. They think it's crazy. What? This is some bizarre conspiracy theory. Well, what? This is a conspiracy theory. I mean, Ingalls was a wealthy stock owner. Lord Milner and his crew are the brain, the engine behind the Fabians. And we're actually going to get to who exactly we're talking about. Then he gets to the section that we covered in Sutton, where Sutton had discussed the Lloyd George government flipping and supporting the Bolsheviks due to the influence of Lord Milner. And we're going to get into Milner's kindergarten and the roundtable groups and John Ruskin and all that. That's all going to be coming up. So Wall Street, as Sutton points out, supported the Bolsheviks, just like Milner supported Lloyd George and the Fabians. Same principles here. And it's not just Lord Milner, it's a bunch of the other clique of that clique, including Rothschild. Liberal capital, then, has always been the backbone of socialism. And again, it's just so hard to get people, they just can't grasp this. I don't know why. I mean, it's in all the academic literature that's not from complete normie academics. It even came up in my normie academic classes. And how can people not figure this out? I mean, take, for example, the Federal Reserve System and the graduated income tax and the fiat money and all that, the central bank plan. That's in the Communist Manifesto. That's the planks of the Communist Manifesto. Did you know David Rockefeller was, at one time, head of the New York Federal Reserve? I mean, it's not rocket science here. Then he mentions some of the key figures that will pop up. Beatrice Webb and Sidney Webb, along with George Bernard Shaw, will be these key players in the movement and promotion of Fabian socialism. So these are not directly connected to Karl Marx, although it's speculated that George Bernard Shaw might have met Karl at some point, because I think he had some dalliance, or he tried to spit game at Karl Marx's daughter, I think. But basically what we're getting at here is that when we get more specific in terms of Fabianism, he says, understandably not... he says, The Guardian, which is a paper run by Rothschild associates Paul Myers and Anthony Sauls and their global followers, that the financiers who bankroll world socialism also bankroll the rebellions against themselves. Occupy Wall Street, for example, had money from Soros. This is a classic example. The purpose of this tactic is then to mislead opposition and to trick the political system into introducing further banking control and centralization. This is a key demand that both Marx and Engels mention in the Communist Manifesto. That's exactly what I just said, the planks. Thus, while smaller, honest banks are struggling, offending global giants like Lazard, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, Rothschild are growing their links to one another. And by the way, they get bailed out, right? This is actually a strategy, a technique. These same players have a key influence on the Fabians. These same players will also be crucial in the United Nations and the notion of world socialism itself. So world socialism in all of its forms will have a key origin in these figures. Why does socialism catch on? Well, socialism catches on and becomes global because it is fundamentally about global governance. Now, sure, every empire ever wanted to be a global empire, sure. So that's not what's particularly surprising. But what is, I think, surprising is that each of the movements of Marxism itself carried with it the title of international, right? The first international with Karl Marx, the second international in 1889, and then Lenin's international, which I guess is the third international. I get these kind of phases mixed up. But and then that didn't really go away. It might have gone away in the classic Marxist sense, but it didn't really go away because, this is to quote the 1962 Oslo Conference. The Socialist International made a position very clear. Our ultimate objective is, the parties of the Socialist International, to establish nothing less than a global government. is a first step towards it, in that we seek to strengthen the UN, that it might become more and more effective. Membership in the United Nations must then be made universal. So that was the 1962 Oslo Conference of Socialism, the Socialist International. The Socialists also supported the establishment of the League of Nations as well. Probably that's the prior instantiation of the United Nations as a result of World War I. The Socialist International supported the establishment of a British Commonwealth and the European Community way early. And guess what? Remember, guys, where did we see that the EU was born in terms of Esterlin's book on Biberg, the Biberg group? Out of Biberg in the 50s, not the 90s, the 50s. And the same people were the same ones calling for United Nations-based socialism. With capitalist collaboration, the main nation's driving force behind these steps towards socialism is the dominant ideology to be found in the Soviet Union, Europe, China, and even now in the liberal socialism that's emerging in the United States. So he's writing in 2012. So he's saying up into the present day, this is the same. This is still spreading. Okay, so even though it might have shed the stupid parts of Marx's early ideological nonsense, it is able to evolve and morph. How? Through the Fabian strategy. Ratiu goes on to talk about how pretty much everybody from 1946 to 1992 in the United Nations have all been public avowed socialists. Remember Tedros? He's another good example of this, right? These kinds of figures, right? Then he gets to socialism in the EU, the KALERGI plan. That is a form of socialism in 1931. And then we have this character, I guess I'd forgotten about him, Sir Arthur Salter. And Salter is the one who really said, no, we need a straight up socialist European Union. Where's Salter come in? And in 1951, Salter, from the Fabian Society, served as the head of the economic financial section of the League of Nations, then published a collection of papers called the United States of Europe, which explored how there could be a federated Europe in 1931. No, wait, 31 or 61? 31, wow. So this is actually 20 years before Estelin says Bilderberg said, let's do the EU. Okay, so the Fabians had planned what Bilderberg talked about 20 years earlier in this character, Sir Arthur Salter from the Fabian Society. So there you go. See, there you go. Now this makes sense why Alan Watts so long ago was talking about all this actually being planned by the Royal Society earlier than Biberg. Okay, so that this is where he's getting that. So now we know. And this is the book called United States of Europe by Sir Arthur Salter. I need to get that book. I also need to get that book that Quigley makes a lot of reference to by Lord Curtis, The Commonwealth of God. Because that's early as well, that lays out all these same plans. And he's one of these figures in the Fabian circles. So it's interesting too that he doesn't mention, he mentions 1955 founds the Action Committee for the United States of Europe. That must be this plan that comes out of Biberg, Bilderberg, which is in Eslin's book. But you can see who's planning this, who's on board with this, you see. All right, what's the logic of this? The logic of this is that socialism is necessary in terms of its internal logic for the destruction of the nation state. In other words, the internal logic of socialism dictates the destruction of the nation state. Why is that? And none of the typical analysis out there can really grasp this. But it's not that hard to grasp if you think about it, because liberal economic theory out of the Adam Smith, Ricardo schools, right? This stuff. This, ironically, leads to the establishment of an international law which undergirds free enterprise, free market commerce. And I don't think that's that controversial. If you guys remember, Kant has a whole essay about how if we have an international government that allows for free trade, we won't have war anymore. Remember, Kant has a whole essay on this. So Kant was actually an Enlightenment era internationalist in that regard. He didn't favor communism or the destruction of the nation state, but here's the irony of this position, because the establishment of the international law for the sovereign nation states is the logic behind the idea of the establishment of international law that gets rid of nation states. If we have international law for commerce, why wouldn't we just have international law that gets rid of the nation states? Then we won't have war anymore, dude. And this is literally the propaganda line here. Oh, we won't have war anymore, man. One world, man. One world, dude. We're all world citizens, man. Yeah, dude. It's one world, dude. Remember when Coldplay was playing the Super Bowl like 4 or 5 years ago? And their whole thing was a big rainbow, and it's one world, man. Yeah, man. One world. One world, dude. So you can see the logic then of move to international law, it makes sense. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense to have international law, but it makes sense for for them to go the step further and say, well, if we have international law for the nation states, then doesn't it seem to stand the reason that we should get rid of the nation states and have international states or an international state? Liberal economics gives you international law and nation states, but then that gives way to international socialism, where there's international law and a world government and a world state. Because we'll get rid of war, dude. The key here then would be to create, as Lenin said, not a national culture, but an international culture, a global culture. Quote, we are against national cultures. We want international culture. That's Lenin. This will create a truly democratic, equal proletarian, he's saying. What? Yeah, so if you're all Gumby people, you'll all be equal, right? If you just turn into Gumby, dude, then you'll be equal. In 1966, the British Labour Party passed the 1948 British Nationality Act, which argued that all inhabitants of the British Empire should freely live and work in the UK itself, and that this was the key to an open society, a fair society, and diversity, etc. And what does it do? Well, have you been to London? Thus, global capitalism builds the New World Order for socialism. This is the idea and the mindset of the Fabians and the Labour Party. They believe this. So while they may not want capitalism as the end goal, as both Marx and H.G. Wells said, global capitalism will build the infrastructure that we will convert, they say, to the socialist world order. Amazing. This then is why ISLAM is a tool for the changing of Europa, we'll say. And I think you can figure that out. You can put those puzzle pieces together, I'm sure, right? All right. If you would, guys, to support us by liking and sharing, and if you wanted to do the super chats, you can. I want to remind you guys, too, that one way to combat toxic socialism is by equally toxic masculinity. It's basically a yin-yang system where they fight each other for all eternity. But in the end, we know the toxic masculinity will come out on top, because the logic of this goofy system dictates that even nature itself must be warred against, because nature isn't fair and equal. And we know that that's obviously the case. And in order to be in tune with nature, we want to be healthy. And to be healthy, we want to utilize products that are even perhaps better than organic and that increase our toxic masculinity points. Are you having shrinking balls? You want to explode them testicles? Well, the way to do that is testosterone. Is there any products out there that, along with a healthy diet, increase testosterone? Why, yes, there is. There's the Tomcat Ali, which I highly recommend, and I do take. And you can get that over at choq.com. That is the show sponsor, choq.com. They offer a 50% discount for listeners to viewers of Jay's Analysis. They're big supporters of us, and also, as you guys know, of Tristana. But we have the promo codes that are the best, and they actually work. So you want to use the promo code JAY50, JAY50 over at choq.com. Put in that promo code, you'll get 50% off anything, including the Tomcat Ali, which is a rainforest-sourced adaptogen. Right, these are the best adaptogens that make up for what's missing in our nutrient-deficient diets or so-called diets in the West. We have the worst garbage, GMO, junk food, fake food diets. That's why it's so crucial to get into paleo, keto, carnivore, whatever's right for you in terms of your medical health issues. And to also supplement that food because our diets are nutrient deficient. They also offer Irish moss. They offer the ashwagandha. Again, they offer the Shilajit, all these great options for mental clarity, for focus. Jamie takes Shilajit every day. They offer the daily. They offer the Action 2.0, 7 Wonders. I mean, they've got it all depending on what you need. They also have stacks for men and for women. So use that promo code J50 to get 50% off. Amazing discount at Choq, right? They also have the chocolate, which is the lip powder superfood, great in a smoothie. They have the cacao beans. They've got it all over at choq.com. They also have recurring subscriptions so that you don't have to put that information in if you want to keep getting that Choq in regular doses and supplies. You become a Choq fiend. You go over there snorting it, putting capsules in your nose, putting capsules who knows where else because you're so hooked on that Choq. You can use a different promo code for the recurring subscriptions. I highly recommend doing it this way because it makes it so much easier, just like Jeffrey Bezos does over there on Amazon. Just use the recurring subscription, and that promo code is J53LIFE. That's J53LIFE, JAY53LIFE, 53% off any of those supplements that we're talking. Remember, guys, supply lines might be going down. They might outlaw, ban supplements. Not illegal or wrong to you can get supplements on the internet. I can have a supplement supporter of our channel, and they're a great company, very BASED, very REDPILLED. What if I just spelled out every sentence, everything on the podcast? What if it was all just spelled out? Well, let's get back to that crazy covert society, the Fabians. Fabianism, according to Ratiu, is the world's most influential social, political, economic, and cultural movement. Wow, vast claim, grand claim. Does he back it up? I think he does. And so if that's the case, well, we need to be aware of that if we're going to know geopolitics of the 20th century. If we want to be accurate historians, and we do want to be that. One of my other degrees, I'd have a history degree. I was 2 classes away from a double major. I'm almost a degree in history as well. So I want to know the most influential political economic movement. Sure, yeah, I want to know that. It's called Fabian socialism. This was an intentional movement for global reach out of almost invisible London headquarters. From humble beginnings, they were able to ascend to this high level of status and influence throughout the 20th century. And he's got a little picture here that's very helpful. You see this little picture. You can see the original Fabian club there. They had an espresso bar. They had an espresso bar right there where you go and you snort your espresso and you get all hyped up to talk about the means of production and George Bernard Shaw and all this nonsense. And then the other little door is the upstairs society. Now, the Fabians weren't really a secret society. They existed and operated in the open. But they were covert in the sense that they were covert about their means and methods of permeation. Permeation. This is their term for their strategy of infiltration, string pulling, power grabs, and subversion. Now, they weren't subversive in political assassinations and destroying economies. It wasn't like that. It was more so ideological influence. Let's work with magazines that are liberal. Let's work with professors and schools that are liberal. Let's type up our pamphlets and spray them out everywhere across London or whatever. They describe themselves as, quote, a moral society for the expansion of socialist, Marxist, quote, morals. Fabianism takes its name from Quintus Fabius Maximus, the Roman general dictator who, against superior Carthaginian forces, decided that a gradual establishment of attack and strategy would be better than a outright confrontation, because it would lose. And so thus, you can see, that's old Roman general name. He wasn't a socialist. I mean, he was a Roman general, so he had probably the Roman fascia going on, right? But the Fabians had the idea to take this name as a strategy for the gradual slow kill implementation of Marxism, aka reformed Marxism, known as Fabian socialism. They were obsessed with the idea of the political economy. So whereas George Bernard Shaw, who had become infatuated with Marx at an early age, was originally a rabid radical Marxist, he realized, as many Marxists did, that when Marx's predictions for revolutionary proletariat didn't come to pass, that there had to be some tweaking to the system. So the tweaking to the system led to this emphasis and obsession with what they call political economy, political economics. And it began as a reading circle at the Hampstead Historic Club, where Marxist theories of value and other inventions were discussed and heatedly debated. And this, no doubt, fueled the Fabian obsession with their term, quote, political economics. This obsession resulted in the establishment of the British Economic Association, the BEA. However, this became titled, get this, the Royal Economic Society, was the Royal Economic Society from 1902. So the 1902 Royal Economic Society is the British Economic Association of Fabians. The London School of Economics and similar economic outfits, the very prominent LSE, London School of Economics. A lot of the elite come out of the LSE. It doesn't mean everybody who went there is a Fabian socialist, a part of a secret society, but it means that the institution exists to promote Fabian socialism. Contrary to the Fabian apologetic, the fact that Thomas Davidson, who's a leading Fabian, as well as other leading Fabians and teachers from money power controlled universities, were also involved in the founding of the American Association in Saratoga. So the American Economic Association was set up as a Fabian outpost in, Saratoga, Florida. This indicates, as shown below, that far from being the creation of selfless, poor, organic idealists, Fabian socialism from the outset served a financial elite. The four key socialists of the first phase of Fabianism were Sidney Webb, Sidney Oliver, Graham Wallas, and George Bernard Shaw. George Bernard Shaw is the playwright who, of course, would put into his plays a lot of the Fabian socialist ideas. So these four become kind of the brain trust, I guess you could say, of the original society, and they had a lot of connections and buddies at Oxford, like Graham Wallas was at Oxford, and they became the, quote, Big Four. So these are the leadership and the original Fabians, the Big Four. From these Big Four comes the idea of permeation. Permeation is the strategy of socialism by stealth not by outright revolution. This eventually gained the term Reformed Marxism. So the Fabians are also at times called the Reformed Marxists. The Fabian permeation strategy, in Shaw's own words, was, quote, wire pulling within governments in order to get socialism measures passed. This became a key policy of Fabians, particularly promoted by Beatrice and Sidney Webb, who loved their scheming, quote unquote. Fabianism is thus permeation is key to understanding the Fabian idea of infiltration. This is where we get this bizarre, and we'll probably close here because we've been going for a long time. But then again, I talked about Bitcoin for like 30 minutes. But if you guys would, again, please hit like and share, support the stream, support via the Streamlabs Super Chat there. Wolf in sheep's clothing. This is where it gets really interesting. The Fabians adopted a couple images, one of which will eventually be a turtle for the slow implementation of socialism. The other being the wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, do you need me to explain that symbol for you? This all exemplifies the subversive nature of the Fabian project. George Bernard Shaw in 1910 commissioned a stained glass window, which we'll show from left to right, where Fabian leaders Edward Peace, Sidney Webb, and Bernard Shaw himself are forging a new world order. The other Fabians below them kneel in a worshipful stance next to a stack of Fabian writings. So this takes on a blasphemous religious style. Now, the Fabians said, oh, it's just a joke, right? Shaw had this stained glass window made as a joke, but it actually exemplifies the truth. The motto of the window is, I can't read my notes. I don't even know what that says. The motto of the window reads, remold the world closer to our heart's desire. Whose heart? Satan's heart. The Fabians expressed their plans then to destroy and reconstruct society along Fabian lines. The wolf in sheep's clothing became a key symbol here. The wolf above the globe holds a red flag with the initials of ES. What is it? The Fabian window, as it is known, was executed by Caroline Townsend and is now located. I don't know what it means. Executed. Moved. Is now located at the London School of Economics. He doesn't say what the ES stands for. ES. English socialism? I have no idea what it stands for. As proof of its enduring significance, British socialists had the window unveiled in 2006 by Prime Minister Tony Blair. So it still exists. Tony Blair liked it, he unveiled it publicly. And, quote, according to Blair, that he was a committed Fabian who stood for the very ideas that Shaw stood for, recognizable in today's Labour Party. So that's according to the London School of Economics News and Media website, quoting Tony Blair himself. So no need to consider this as some kind of conspiracy theory when it's admittedly in the open. The world through Fabian eyes is seen in the Fabian window, and you can see it here for you guys. I'll show you the window. Make sure you can see the light there. So there's the at the bottom is all the goofuses worshiping their stack of inane, boring, nonsense writings, and then you see them hammering out, hammer and sickle, hammer and anvil, right? The workers of the world unite. And there you see the wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, what does that tell you? And so you can see that even though this is supposed to be a joke, it actually is like a cult. It is cult-like. Where did the money come from? Who is funding the Fabian Society? Well, Marx himself, as we said, had a secret society that he set up called the Communist League. The Fabians, although they weren't a strictly speaking secret society, would use this same idea of an inner core of intellectual elite, and they would get money from Cadbury. And by the way, they come up in Quigley. Yes, Cadbury. I'm pretty sure that's it says the Cadbury chocolate, so it's got to be them nasty Cadbury eggs, right? And another family called the Roundtrees. And I think they had something to do with chocolate or food, something. Roundtree, who were the chocolate manufacturers, and the Fabian sponsors, Cadbury. So basically 2 big chocolate companies. So you can thank chocolate for the destruction of the world order, right? How the New World Order? How did Marx become the New World Order? But chocolate, dude, from chocolate. They were infiltrating through chocolate Easter bunnies the whole time, baby. Now that's not the only family, but they were early phase Fabian money comes from them. Then Shaw finds himself in the circles of very elite people, very wealthy people, and they called this remember the wire pulling that we had referenced earlier? They also called it, quote, catching millionaires. Catching millionaires and wire pulling allowed for the moving of all the forces that they had control over to spur Shaw to write a pamphlet called Socialism for Millionaires. This apparently started a, quote, millionaire movement that converted Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie Endowment, Carnegie Foundation. Steel magnate Andrew Carnegie was then followed by John Davison Rockefeller Sr. of Standard Oil and Henry Ford of Ford Motor, who found, apparently, Shaw's pamphlet, Socialism for Millionaires, convincing. Thus, Bernard Shaw influenced David Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Ford. Now, who actually believes that these people were seriously interested in helping the public? Come on. No, they saw this as a tool for power, for centralization of wealth and transference of wealth offshore. Thus, they were also connected to and formed their Fabian model on Lord Milner's previous secret society. Prominent position in this network was held by the infamous Milner Group, which was part of the Fabians. So they're overlapping. It became a parallel organization to the Fabians. The Milner Group began as a small, highly intellectual secret society established in 1891 by diamond magnate Cecil Rhodes. That's in John Roberts' public biography of Cecil Rhodes, not a conspiracy theory. It's in Quigley. Together with Lord Alfred Milner and Nathan Rothschild, they bankrolled the Rhodes Trust, or the Bayet Trust, with the Astors, the Lazard brothers, and this is all mentioned in Quigley. So he cites Quigley. They also had close relationships with the banking houses of the Anglo-American establishment, J.P. Morgan, Carnegie, and other elite members of America's Eastern Seaboard establishment. Exactly. They were also influenced by Arnold Toynbee. Toynbee's imperial model of socialism. Although supportive of the empire, Lord Milner was a Marxist. He believed in a noble form of socialism. He and his group derived their ideology from Arnold Toynbee and John Ruskin. It's key to, I don't know if he mentions Ruskin. Socialist theories of social reform eventually led to the dissolution of the British Empire, while the Fabians then dominated the labor movement. The Milner Group operated mainly in liberal and conservative circles. The Milner Group operated in liberal and conservative circles. Control of fake left and right. And George Bernard Shaw, by the way, did not just work with Fabians. He also worked for the Milner Group. So he was in both of these groups. Now, fascinating next section. Guess who else got all tied up in these Fabian circles? Somebody that we recently covered. And I didn't actually know that she was involved in these circles. I knew she kind of had this socialist bent, but who's a couple goofuses that we recently covered? Remember her 10-point plan to take over Christianity in the world? Where did this goofy woman, witch woman, where did she get her plan to take over Christianity in the West? It wasn't from her. She's a goofus, a goofy witch. Annie Besant. And I would add also by extension, it's got to be Alice Bailey and Blavatsky as well. Remember our stream on Bolshevism and espionage, where we got into Besant, Bailey, and Bolshevik spies? This is a big puzzle piece. Do you see this? Interesting. So now we can link the Bolsheviks to Annie Besant, which we knew about this through Blavatsky. Remember that? And who was that other weird guy? What was that stream? I just did it the other day. You guys remember this? Anyway. But this is what will link Blavatsky to espionage networks. Is that the stream? No, that's not it. I'm pretty sure I did this. Let me find the stream, because this is really relevant to right here. Because his next section, he's going to get into the New Agers, because the New Agers at the turn of the century played a key role because they were Fabians. I mean, I guess I should have realized this, but sometimes the obvious dot connectors, right, that are staring you in the face, like it doesn't click with you until later. So let's see here. What was that stream? It was I think it's the Annie Besant stream. It's either that or the Guru stream. I can't remember which one it is. We did two kind of similar streams. Okay, the Wicca New Age cults and creepers. No, occult spies. I think I talked about it. Okay, it's in both of these. 10-point New Age takeover plan. Where do you think? So this is like a Fabian thing. So here is the occult spies talk. That's a good one. That's a partial talk, but it mentions her. And then here is the full Guru stream about Annie Besant. So here's that. And guys, now does it make sense why Bailey, Blavatsky, Besant are the philosophy of the United Nations officially? Boom, now it all clicks. Why? Because they're Fabians. And they're in the circles of these people. So the New Age movement is essentially promoted and created by these people to foster world socialism for the banking corporate elite. Bam. There you go. John Passmore Edwards in the 1840s worked for the Sentinel. This is a Manchester, a publication, which became a liberal publication that promoted what became known as the Manchester School, a liberal movement that advocated free trade. So notice the pre-Marxist, the proto-Marxist publications that helped Marx get started are international peace movements advocating for free trade. I mean, libertarians, do you hear this? You hear this? This allows John Passmore Edwards to make a partnership with Andrew Carnegie. So we're going back to the 1800s because, again, you can't get to the Fabians and this stuff without understanding the influence of all these early 1800s and mid 1800s, late 1800s magazines. Pall Mall Gazette, the Triumphant Democracy magazine, the Sentinel. Okay, these are all liberal, the North American Review, liberal 1800s publications promoting free trade that allow Marxism to come in, which produces Fabianism. Fabianism then influences the United Nations, the whole EU structure, the London School of Economics, and is thus promoted by the Anglo-American elites. And that's everything that's in Quigley. So you read this in Quigley, you got the whole picture. Manchester School liberalism was necessary to pave the way for Marxism and its slogans, etc. They also found alliance with different other secret societies. For example, Besant and some of the Fabians said we should also infiltrate and utilize Freemasonic circles. The slogans of the Fabians and the Marxists and the Fabians was free trade, world peace, universal brotherhood, philanthropy. Now that the later Fabians might not have liked free trade, but early Marxists were like, yes, free trade, universal brotherhood, world peace. There's actually a thing I think it was on Marxist.org where Marx was arguing for free trade and open borders. I'm not kidding, because he thought that would entice the workers to be angry. Because if you had open borders, the workers would get angry because they would realize that that's an attack on the local indigenous working population. So Marx actually says, no, let it happen because it'll get them mad. So much for being a man of the people, right? Other famous Fabians hopped on board, like Lord Balfour and Lord Stead, which we covered in Quigley's book. And here's one I knew this guy was a mover and shaker in terms of later social engineering and whatnot, but I did not know that he was actually in the Milner group and the Fabian Society. Maybe Quigley mentions it in Anglo-American Society. Walter Lippmann. Walter Lippmann was a member of both the Milner group and the Fabian Society. This is wild. As we said from Sutton, Lord Milner is who influences Lord George and flip in the UK policy to support Bolshevism. Now, we've talked in the past about David Rockefeller and his memoirs, where he speaks of his influence by von Mises, right? So he'd written papers about von Mises and libertarian economics. But we have to keep in mind that he was also influenced by Fabians. And David Rockefeller got some of his schooling under one of these famous Fabians. What was his name? David Rockefeller was influenced by Fabianism. He had written a sympathetic thesis on Fabianism at Harvard. His family was provided sizable grants to the London School of Economics, which helped influence them. The Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial Fund, the Rockefeller Foundation. Tellingly, the family, all of the family's leaders, all three of them, the sons, studied under Lasky. So the character is named Lasky at Harvard. Who is this guy? Marxist, Fabian Marxist Harold Lasky. So this is where we get that. The early teachers at the London School of Economics were Graham Wallas, Bertrand Russell. Anybody heard of him? Anybody heard of him? Who was in the Fabian Society for a time? Guys, remember? Hello? Remember that guy that idiot pagan guy trying to call me out on Twitter for a footnote that Bertrand Russell wasn't part of all. Dude, was a Fabian. What are you talking about? So Fabianism had its influence at Harvard, as well as Oxford, as well as obviously the London School of Economics. And let's see, Lasky himself, another academic at Harvard, was the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter, who was actually a Fabian pretending to be a liberal Democrat. This is who David Rockefeller had the honor of being drilled in the arcane arts of leftist economics. That's citing David Rockefeller himself on page 79. Before making the acquaintance of Harold Lasky at the London School of Economics. And I'm pretty sure in David Rockefeller's memoirs he does mention LSE. I don't remember if he mentions Lasky, but probably. Yep. So let's see. So to be clear here, David Rockefeller was influenced by both von Mises and the Fabians, you see. And that helps to explain his approach to the blending of what he supports, basically. State capitalist socialism. Let's call it that. Corporate communism. And this is where we get, of course, the CFR and these kinds of things. So, from Rockefeller, obviously. All right. So next, he's going to move into things that the Fabians pushed for: public education, socialization, and that gets us to. He doesn't mention, but in America, you have William James, Horace Mann, John Dewey. I think William James was in that, right? And they're American socialists who are pushing for public schooling, which Blavatsky said in the Fabian magazine. So the Fabians had a magazine called The New Age. In the Fabian magazine, the New Age magazine, Blavatsky says in there, unless that's different from the Scottish Rite New Age magazine, but maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. But in the New Age magazine that Blavatsky wrote for, she said that public schooling would be the means by which children would be socialized to become world socialists, and the utopia would be brought in. So that shows us that Blavatsky is directly she's pretty much has to be an agent of these people, right? As well as Blavatsky, Besant, Bailey. I mean, their philosophy is still the official philosophy of the United Nations, and that's a Rockefeller creation. Not just Rockefeller, but also these people, right? Milner-Fabian, Rockefeller. So the Fabians influenced Lord Balfour, who then influenced one of the Rothschilds, Nathan Rothschild, who was thought to be rather conservative. However, he seems to have been influenced by Fabians. That also became a source of money for the London School of Economics and also the Imperial College. This is wild. So the Imperial College also became sort of permeated of London. Fabianism. In addition to the LSE, another classic example of close collaboration between Fabians and big finance is the Imperial College of London, set up by Sidney Webb with funds from Werner Beit and Company, the gold diamond mining company. Well, that's Cecil Rhodes, right? The purpose of the Fabian permeation was, according to accurately described by Beatrice Webb in her diary. She reviewed the society's advancements and noted in her book Industrial Democracy that it had been extraordinarily well received. Indeed, the volume 1 of the 1897 book was translated into Russian by Vladimir Lenin and his later secretary and wife, Krupskaya. So Vladimir Lenin and Beatrice Webb are BFF, apparently. Big fans of each other. So again, Fabianism, Leninism, it's not a big deal that they're all kind of doing the same thing. Okay, we're going to stop there because next he gets into the New Age movement and how the New Age movement really is 100% bound up with these figures and some of these espionage characters that we mentioned before. Who is that? Who is that spy that I mentioned in the that was working with the Bolsheviks? Remember that guy? I know these names, I just went blank. So Blavatsky, Bailey, Besant, and there was that Bolshevik guy who some people think might have been her handler. So basically, the Theosophical Society is more or less the same crew. But you'll notice that the reason we're doing this, the reason this book is so crucial, is that it's going to really give us the background and the understanding of what's going on in our world today. I mean, how do we get to, Klaus and Davos? It's this. Literally this. This is the precursors, the preparatory ways to which we get to Klaus. And that helps us understand that we're not dealing with straight up Marxists. Okay, here we go. The link of theosophy to occultism and espionage. Remember this? This was a great. We covered this essay that somebody wrote, this article on one of those other streams, and this is where Crowley, the hidden masters, the ascended masters, right? Dr. Spence thinks that that's probably a reference to intelligence handlers. Blavatsky's Great White Lodge, blah, blah, blah. Maybe she really was thinking she was channeling things, or was she speaking of her handlers, or both? Winston Churchill's spy master Desmond Morton later concluded nearly all of these theosophists and theosophical societies are connected to Bolshevism. And where did Bolshevism get its money and power? From what we're talking about. So here's the factor that links all of this stuff. Roerich, that's the guy I couldn't think of. So theosophy and Soviet intelligence connects to the character via the character Nikolai Roerich, the noted theosophist who collaborated with Soviet intelligence. Like many educated Russians, Roerich had fled his homeland during the chaos of revolution and civil war, but by the 1920s, he was itching to return. Roerich, through his medium wife Helena, claimed that his own communication with Master Moria and the Mahatmas allowed him to see the convergence between world communism and theosophy. Both of these aspired to create a new world order based on universal brotherhood. Roerich became a Soviet agent of influence. He lobbied with the Bolshevik leaders to dispatch him as a missionary to Tibet. In other words, he was doing intelligence work. He found supporters there as well. One of these was Gleb Boki. He was one of the guys that we covered in Mark's essay doing the Eyes Wide Shut stuff among the Bolsheviks. Gleb Boki was a high-ranking member of the Soviet or the Bolshevik secret police. Dedicated communist, Boki was devoted also to studying the occult. Before the revolution, he had been a Freemason and a member of the Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Cross. He may have also been a Satanist. Yeah, exactly. On a practical level, Boki oversaw the pursuit of mystical knowledge to be an excellent cover for intelligence gathering. Did you hear that? On a practical level, Gleb Boki saw the pursuit of mystical knowledge as a cover for intelligence work. In late 1923, Roerich got the okay to lead an expedition to Tibet, and this took him through the British Himalayas. Soviet intelligence and political agents were attracted to his party disguised as religious pilgrims. One of these pilgrims in disguise was Yakov Blumkin, among the most experienced and resourceful of Soviet spies. Actually, Roerich used communism to advance theosophy, while the Kremlin was attempting to use theosophy to advance communism. In response to Indian officials' concerns about Roerich, British intelligence officer Vivian Burberry advised that India reach out to another man who had curiously intimate knowledge of all these occult things. His name was Aleister Crowley. Nicholas Roerich then takes theosophy to America. Roerich and his brand of theosophy also spread to America during the 1920s. He cultivated a following amongst wealthy spiritual seekers in New York. Catch the millionaires, according to Beatrice Webb. One of them was millionaire Wall Street man Louis Horch. In 1934, Roerich met Henry Wallace, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Secretary of Agriculture. This is the same Henry Wallace who persuades FDR to put the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. Yes, you heard me right. Occultist, theosophist, Marxist, Henry Wallace is the reason why there's an all-seeing eye on your dollar bill. Wallace became one of Roerich's devotees, and in correspondence, he gushingly addresses his Russian as his dear guru or handler. Wallace even got Roosevelt to sign a bizarre scheme to sign off on a bizarre scheme to dispatch Roerich to Mongolia and Manchuria. His supposed job was to collect samples of drought-resistant grass for Dust Bowl research. However, this was a cover. Nicholas Roerich? Am I getting mixed up? Nikolai, that's Nicholas. Nicholas Roerich's real mission was to instigate a revolt, a coup, to create a vast pan-Buddhist empire in Central Asia. When this became known, Wallace dropped Roerich like a hot potato. Thus, secret societies, occultism, and espionage fit together nicely. I think isn't this Dr. Spence's article? I think it is. Yes. Dr. Richard Spence, PhD, University of Idaho. Again, great article. Ties in directly with all of what we're talking about today. So definitely check that out. By the way, he has a book that's also a part 2 of Anthony Sutton. I forget what it's titled, but you can look up his books. We mention it in our interview. Anyway, so there you go. Great, fascinating connections there. And in the next few days, I will do part 2. We'll get into the next. How far did we get? We got pretty good. We got up to page 70 almost. So we'll probably do the next 70, 100 pages for the member section. And it won't be tonight. It won't be tomorrow. It'll be a couple days as I read through the next 70, 100 pages. And that'll be for subscribers to Jay's Analysis. If you'd like access to that, you can subscribe to my website, which is linked in the show description. $4.95 a month, $60 a year. You get graduate level education, and it's pennies on the dollar. So you can't beat that deal. If you don't want to sign up on the website, you also go to Rockfin. We're going to do these super chats. So we got quite a few here. Let's see what the super chatters are saying. Russian Psycho, $3. If the Coptic Church of Egypt, the Ethiopian Eritrean Church, and the Syriac churches are Oriental, does that mean that they're communion with us? No. That's just what they're title themselves, right? Just like a Roman Catholic might say, I'm Orthodox in my theology, right? That doesn't mean that they're Eastern Orthodox, okay? They are not in communion with us, and they haven't been for, 17, 16, 1500 years. So they're not Orthodox. Are they outside of the Orthodox Church? Correct, they are. What are the differences? Well, they split basically after Ephesus, so they don't like Chalcedon, and the theology basically is frozen there. So the differences are basically everything Chalcedon and after is not something that they really adhere to. That doesn't mean everything that's afterwards they reject. I mean, many of them at least profess to believe in icons, although I think a lot of the Ethiopian churches and the Oriental churches have kind of lost their iconographic tradition because they don't have the Seventh Council. Just like Rome has lost the iconographic tradition because they give verbal credence to the Seventh Council, but they don't actually believe it or follow its canon. So the differences are those things, and then primarily about Christology. So they wedded themselves to early St. Cyril, and they don't really have any flexibility about later Cyril, who says that there's two natures in Christ. They also don't have the development of two energies and two wills. So even though sometimes they'll talk about uncreated energies, because Cyril did, it's not a really fleshed out theology of the energies. So those are the main differences. Russian Psycho, $3. You just doubled it up there. You said it twice. But you said again, for $1, what are Eastern Catholics? So these are people who were at one time Orthodox and rejected, the Filioque or whatever after 1054, who throughout the succeeding centuries and various eras were united back to Rome. So they're sometimes called Uniates, Eastern Catholics, or Byzantine Catholics, and they are in varying degrees in agreements with Latin theology and Latin dogma. So some of them, there's Zogbyites, there's Melkites, there's all these different sort of strata of Eastern Catholics, and we often refer to them because they are a great way to demonstrate that Roman Catholicism is not actually a unified position. Many of them reject the Council of Trent. Many of them reject Vatican I. Many of them reject purgatory. And yet they're still considered to be fully in communion, quote, Roman Catholics or Eastern Uniate Catholics, right? Of course, that illustrates the inconsistency and absurdity of the Roman Catholic position, that on the one hand, you can be a Roman Catholic professing to believe in the papacy and the dogmas, and also at the same time claim to be Catholic and reject the papacy and many dogmas, which many of them do. You can also illustrate this by pointing out that Eastern Catholics revere many Orthodox non-Catholic saints, which makes no sense because multiple medieval Roman Catholic dogmas say that you can't be a saint outside of the Roman Catholic communion, especially Cantate Domino of the Council of Florence, which even specifies that even if you are a martyr for the name of Christ, if you are a martyr outside of communion with the Bishop of Rome, you are damned. And yet, in this absurd, inconsistent position, Eastern Catholics themselves disprove Roman Catholicism. We've made many, many videos, many talks on that, but that's the essence of the argument. You go on to say, are the old believers in Russia schismatic? There may be old believer sects that are still in schism, I don't know, but many of those groups have been reunited to the normal canonical church. Russian Psycho, again, $1. Is psychology a real science or a propaganda product? Maybe both. Maybe there were eras or periods when it was perhaps pseudoscientific. I think some of Freud's elements, some of Carl Jung's elements would be considered nowadays pseudoscience. But at the same time, it does look like there's some insights from Freud or some insights from Carl Jung. So I would say probably a little bit of both. I've read a lot of influential psychologists in the 20th century. Most of them seem to be, they're either pervs or some sort of political agenda. Yeah, I think psychology is often politicized and used to promote things. And you said that psychology is basically used to promote atheism. Yeah. But I mean, we do believe that there is a mind or a psyche. So in principle, there's not necessarily anything wrong with the study of the mind or the study of the psyche. But I don't doubt that the origins of psychology probably come out of some sort of created control mechanism or wealthy fund. I don't know the actual origins, but I'm sure that that's the case. Russian Psycho, $1. A lot of Catholics point to numbers. Latin Americans say the Roman Catholic Church is not declining in Latin America. Well, that may not be the case, but remember in Roman Catholicism, they'll say anybody's part of the church with no catechesis at all, right? I mean, so they'll be counting people that are doing Santeria, right? But Catholicity means the fullness of truth. It's not primarily a definition of numbers. And even Roman Catholics themselves have to admit this when they talk about the Arian crisis, because the majority of the professing visible church in the Arian crisis was Arian or semi-Arian. So clearly Catholicity is not essentially determined by numbers. St. Maximus the Confessor said that if the true band of Orthodox is reduced to a handful, then I will be amongst them as the true Catholic Church. That's St. Maximus's phrase. Now, we believe the true Catholic Church is the Orthodox Church, not the Roman Catholic Church. But I'm just saying that even their own admissions about their own history proves that it's not an issue of numbers. That's not what proves Catholicity. Given the mixing of pagan and Catholic elements in these shitholes, isn't it fair to say that these people aren't really, quote, Catholic? Yeah, that's my point, right? So this is just a bunch of syncretism. It's like the original megachurch. Russian Psycho, again, $1. Is the notion of ends justify the means a Christian principle? I don't think so. I mean, it seems to be Pandora's box. I mean, there might be some sort of extenuating circumstances where you would have to engage in some sort of reasoning on the basis of ends justify the means. I don't know what those would be off the top of my head. There are people, for example, who do bioethics in the Orthodox Church. I don't know bioethics. That's not my field. Father Deacon Ananias knows many people who do. It doesn't mean they're infallible, but, that's a good question. I don't know. But I would tend to say that it seems intuitively kind of dangerous to go down that route. So you said again for $1. Do you think Putin and his circle of influencers are really Orthodox or pretending? I have no idea. I mean, I think that anytime somebody is a state actor, we kind of have to think that they're operating pragmatically in terms of realpolitik. Whether they privately really believe these things, I don't know. Russian Psycho, $2. What is the Orthodox position on indulgences? Yeah, that's a specifically Roman Catholic thing. It evolves out of early canon law, but it comes a medieval Latin thing that is not Orthodox. How do the Catholics reconcile prawn and Borgias? I don't think they do. I think they just say that it was a corrupt period, but they still had the charism, right? So they'll just separate morals from the office, right? the office and the power and the authority can be held by somebody who's completely immoral and wicked, basically. Russian Psycho Dollar, a lot, and they'll say if you disagree with that as Donatism, that's not actually what Donatism said, but that's what they'll say. Russian Psycho Dollar, Protestants try to argue that violence and gore, dang dude, how many, we're on a roll here, should not be part of movie and art. I find this position kind of ridiculous. Is this consistent with Christianity to include violent images? I think there is a place. I mean, the violence and this is in the Bible. So, you read the book of Judges, it's pretty violent. So, yeah, I think it would be kind of silly and prudish to act like there should be no violence in movies. But at the same time, we want to guard against the extreme. So I just think there's a basic idea of prudence that should govern these principles, but not these kind of weird puritanical rules that go even further than the Bible itself. It's kind of ridiculous. But you'll find people who get all super pietistic and moralistic about it. People who criticize me for watching movies and analyzing them, right? So, these people are just kind of like, I don't know, full of huffing their own farts, basically. But at the same time, you wouldn't want to go to the extreme of being like, oh, I can't wait to watch Saw tonight, dude. Or Human Centipede, bro. Obviously that's clearly not what we want to subject our eyes to. Russian Psycho Dollar, is it okay to create pagan-influenced literature with Christian symbolism? Yeah, I think Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. We've done many critiques of that. I just did a video on the Tree of Life. We talked about the Yggdrasil and the image of the tree in other religions. I just did a video on pagan temples. I don't think there's anything odd about that. I think we should look for the Logos Spermaticos, or the seeds of the Logos, anywhere in these kinds of things. Sure. And doing that does not entail accepting Hermeticism. So, correct. I don't believe it should entail that. Kristen, $5. Here is a 350th of a Bitcoin, or it could be a cup of coffee, your choice. Well, thank you, Kristen, and thank you for that. And I'm guessing you were interested in the Bitcoin discussion earlier. Gary on Wrath, there we go, some Babylon Berlin right there. Ich weiß, ich nicht. I was, I'm not. Gary on, that's the lead character. By the way, somebody said the Babylon Berlin new season's coming out. Looking forward to that, because that was a really deep esoteric thing. If you guys didn't watch Babylon Berlin, really well done German show. And shout out to that Garian dude, because he actually, the actor, stood up to the Koof. Remember that? And then Kate from Lost, remember her? She stood up to the Koof mandates too. That's bold stuff from those people. But Babylon Berlin, it does have a little bit of pictorial artistic degeneracy that you have to kind of get through. But if you are looking for a deep, philosophically interesting historical show set in Weimar Republic, this is a good show. And here's my full, will we do an hour and a half breakdown? A year ago. Wow. Doesn't seem like it. So this was actually 1 year ago. September 2021. This is September 2022. So in September 2021, we did a hour and a half breakdown of Babylon Berlin. And it did have references to mind-controlled doctors, handlers, espionage, and transhumanism. So you can go check out my Babylon Berlin analysis if you're interested in that TV show. But Garion, I don't think it's Garion Wrath, because he's a fictional character. Unless the universes are overlapping and we got fictional characters sent as super chats. He says, do you think the Deep STATE wants to destroy Europe and Germany in order to profit from building up Germany again? I don't know if they want to destroy it as much as they want to just create the conditions for world order, whatever the next phase of, the Great Reset world order is. The Germans seem utterly helpless and fully dependent on the U.S. in terms of foreign policy. Yeah, I mean, they've been under the control of the U.S. They were basically reconstructed and set up by the U.S. after WW2. So, do they want to destroy it? I don't know if they want to destroy it as much as control it. Frankie D, $5. Would you be willing to speculate on whether an actual WW3 is inevitable, given that powers that be are hell-bent on using warfare? I don't know about an actual WW3 as much as maybe an economic collapse. I think an economic collapse in the coming months or years is probably more likely than WW3. But, I don't know. That's just my speculation. Storm the Cat, $10. I was thinking about Genesis and Adam and Eve being banished from the garden, and there was a flaming sword placed at the entrance. I think this shows that the essences of objects, sort of like platonic forms, already existed in God before humans invented things like swords. Well, everything that came to be existed in the mind of God because God's omniscient. But I don't know that the cherubim having a sword equates to an archetype of a sword. I mean, the archetype would be God's knowledge in his mind of everything that came to be, including swords, including human swords and angelic swords. So if you mean that the angel's sword is an archetype, no. But we do have the statement in Genesis that the angelic beings of Genesis 6 taught mankind metallurgy. So perhaps in that way, angelic beings instructed men how to create swords, according to Genesis 6. J. Mel, $30. Do you know who started the WCC, World Council of Churches? Yeah, it was the Rockefellers. I mean, they're the ones. I mean, the whole chapter in the authorized biography discusses them putting the money into it. The Greek patriarch is on the council. I'm not sure what to think about it. Well, a lot of people are involved in varying levels in this superstructure, this thing, right? So it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about what they do on the ground, but I imagine it's just like conferences and getting together and yap and pretending like we're all on the same page when obviously we're not. And I'm sure in the history of the Cold War, the World Council of Churches was, involved in a lot of espionage and all that. Everybody, I think, knows that too. But I think there's differing degrees of, quote, participation, and differing Orthodox jurisdictions. Not everybody is involved like the Greeks, and some are not involved. So there's differing degrees there. But I don't think that it's a worthwhile institution, and I would support not being involved in it. Frankie D, $5. The Marxist fallacy sounds just like our shadow gov. If you don't agree with us, then you are bourgeoisie. If you don't agree with us, you are a FASCIST. If you don't agree with us, you're a RASIST. If you don't agree with us, you're a Rusia bot. These are just basically mindless slogans to engage in propaganda and low-level attack. That's all that is. It is not hard to hate on these people. Right. Well, the sad part, though, is that in revolutionary circles, these people are the ones that the revolutionaries destroy themselves. They always eat themselves. So keep that in mind, that as much as, we are mad at these goobers on the street who are the enforcers of this collectivist whatever nightmare, they're the ones that are going to be the first to be destroyed by their masters. That's the sad part. So, Little Samwise rap. Potatoes. $3. Will you ever do a esoteric analysis of music? Do you mean music itself or specific songs? I sing dumb cringecore music, but I'm not a music person. In other words, I didn't have any music training. I don't know music theory, so I don't really feel competent to give a discussion of music. However, I noticed that if you go to academia.edu, one of the Orthodox nuns just published her PhD on Orthodox music theory and logi. And that is called, I'll show you. I was reading it this morning for a little bit when I woke up. It is called The Logi of Song, the Logoi of Song. Chant as the embodiment of theology in Orthodox Christian prayer and worship by Sister Sidonia Friedman. So go to academia.edu, type that in. I heard her present her paper before it was, this is her PhD thesis. I heard her present the paper form of this 2 years ago, and it was fascinating. It was all just the principles of St. Maximus applied to music. It was genius, fascinating, wonderful stuff. Pano, he's a chanter. Pano knows a lot more about that than me. So if you reach out to Pano, he's in the chat a lot. He could tell you a lot more about that than me. I'm just not. I love music. I wish I was trained in music, but my life, Providence, just never really. It didn't give me musical training. There are strange lyrics in pop culture songs. Yeah, that's true. I've thought a lot about getting into pop music lyrics over the years. You could do I could do an analysis of that, but I just kind of forget to do that. Thank you, little Samwise. Dyer clips $5. Jay, Young Dawn Reborn is reacting to your video on orthodoxy on his stream right now. Is that black dude that's evangelical? Can you do a live stream with him? Well, yeah, I'll do a live stream with pretty much anybody. Would you review his video or a debate? Absolutely. Of course, anybody with a degree or a large channel. So that's the new criteria, right? If you don't have a degree and you don't have a large audience, no, not doing a debate. It's a waste of time. And we've seen in recent debates that the people who don't have any training or knowledge of even basic fallacies and logic, it's a waste of time to do those debates, right? Everybody has seen this with my recent debate and with David Patrick Harry recent debate. It's just hours of talking past people who have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, if you don't know what basic fallacies are, you have no business doing a debate. But I don't know who Young Dawn Reborn is. Is that the guy that's friends with Sneeko? But yeah, of course I would do a discussion, live stream, debate, whatever he wants to do. Noah Hawley, $5. Are you interested? I'd be interested in doing private tutoring. I will pay you very well. So I used to do tutoring, as you guys know, but then the audience grew to where it just wasn't possible to do that. I'm not able to fit. We had, people who wanted to do an hour. 5 people wanted to do an hour in a day, right? So that'd be like 5 hours in a row. And what ended up happening was, I'm basically giving the same topic or lecture 5 times in a row. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So, but what we're going to do to solve this very issue is our good buddy over at tragedyandhope.com, Richard Grove. Richard reached out and said, hey, why don't you come over here to Autonomy? Autonomy is Richard's kind of masterclass. Remember this thing that's out there where there's masterclass? And I looked at that and I was like, that's kind of a ripoff, because it was like David Lynch will talk for 2 hours and you pay $500 and it's a masterclass. Well, if I'm paying $500, $1,000, I want more than 2 hours of David Lynch talking about basic filmmaking, right? I want like a course, college course. So Richard had the idea to set up his online autonomy university, right? Libertarian focused, right? I'm not full on libertarian, but we do share commonalities and overlap with libertarians on certain areas. To have common ground with the libertarians, we agree with Hoppe. And so, but Richard reached out and said, hey, will you teach a couple courses? I said, yeah, absolutely. It'd be great. So I think what we're going to do is we listed some ideas of topics to cover. So one was the writings of the global elite, obviously, as a course. Another course is just kind of overview of basics of philosophy and worldview. So that would be, we would do like introduction to philosophy, introduction to metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and then history of philosophy and ideas from ancient, medieval to today. And so basically it would just be like the master class, but full on courses. And in those master class things that you pay all this money for, that you just listen to them talk for like an hour or two, you don't interact with them. But what Richard does at Autonomy is Richard has lecture and then extended Q&A. So basically we're going to do that. So I'm going to be teaching courses over at Autonomy. We're going to start with one course on philosophy, introduction to philosophy. But again, because this is going to be, full on, professionally done, hosted at Richard's thing, it's not going to be like it was before, where I charge $100 for tutoring. This will be a little bit more expensive. And this is Richard's platform. It's his idea. It's how they run things. Our buddy Benny Wills, if you guys remember Benny. Benny just put up his course on public speaking, communication. So Benny taught a whole course. I think I don't know what Benny charges, but $1,000 for his course. So basically it'll be like that, where it's still cheaper than college, but it's going to be a full university style course. But it'll be better than that too, because let's say I do a 2-hour lecture on whatever, I'll have 2 hours of open forum where you can chat. So basically it'll be like what we used to do in Discord, which I loved the Discord time. It was a lot of fun, but here I am doing 5-hour Q&As, and it's helping people, but it's not making any money. I'm teaching for free for years, for hours on Discord. So people bitch about what I do. Well, as much as people bitched about me having a paywall, do you realize how many countless hours of teaching we put into Discord for free? And do you know how many people do all of that for free? Hardly anybody. So I feel like I've put in my time teaching for free. Just like before, when I had the blog back in the day, I put in my time writing blogs for free. I don't write for free anymore. Anything I write from now on is a book that you pay for. I don't write for free anymore. I made my bones writing for free. Likewise, I made my bones teaching and doing Q&A for free for countless hours in 4 years of Discord. I'm not doing that anymore. Now I will teach a course, and we'll come up with a price, and we'll be flexible, right? Richard's not a loan shark. He's flexible on cost. So we'll work with people that don't have whatever monetary amount that we come up with. But you will be able to come and you can bring your Q&A. And I won't restrict you to only talking about philosophy. If you sign up for a philosophy course and you want to talk about Vladimir Lofsky, that's fine. So that's how that will work. So hopefully, Noah, that will help you. I just set up with Richard a couple of days, yesterday, the day before, the plan to do this. The first course that I'm going to be teaching with Richard is going to be, well, when I say with Richard, I mean with Richard's platform, is going to be, what day is that? 19th. So the first course on autonomy will be Philosophy Introduction 101 on Richard's Autonomy site, October 19th. And, we'll have an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then we'll have open Q&A. And I think the way it works is like you'll have sort of, we'll stagger it. It'll be recorded, so you don't have to watch it live. But if you want to do the Q&A, you'll need to be there live, obviously. It'll be a full-on course. I don't know how many installments we'll do. We'll have to see. But the idea is to hammer it out in 2 weeks, right? And that course will be there forever, right? So it'll be evergreen. It'll be there at Autonomy. And then what we'll do next year is do another season, another course. So it'll be lecture series number 2. And maybe it won't even be a year away. I don't know. Maybe it'll be in a few months or 6 months. I don't know how we'll set it up. But so Richard Grove has multiple projects, not just strategyandhope.com. He also has Autonomy University, and he also obviously does his popular podcast over on Rockfin, Grand Theft World. Richard has used clips of me for years, many times. I listen to Grand Theft World. All those guys do great work. We agree probably with 70 to 80% of what Richard puts out over there on autonomy. So I'm more than happy to work with Richard. I love Richard's work. Always been a big fan. We did our first interview, I think 8 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And we've done a few since, but this is going to be great because I've for a long time, I wanted to hook up and do more stuff with Richard. So this is the opportunity to do that. So when we get the course up, right, I'll let everybody know. Just follow me on the social medias, and it'll be posted in the next day or two, right? You'll have the ability to begin sort of planning to sign up for that. But as I said, I can tell you for sure that the first course over at Autonomy will be October 19th, and I'll be bringing, it won't just be me blathering forever. I'm going to bring in subject matter experts as well. We'll try to bring on Dr. Bradshaw, who knows who else, my Father Vladimir to talk about Renaissance philosophy or something like that, Renaissance art and aesthetics, right? So obviously aesthetics is an important part of philosophy. So, I'll be bringing in subject matter experts as well. It won't just be me, rambling forever. But that's going to be fun. Looking forward to that. But again, it's not going to be, $4.95 a month. It's going to be a full, heavy dose of essentially a college course is what it's supposed to be. Tropes, $5. I am pay piggy. Ooh, thank you so much, Tropes. Jmail, $5. Did you see that the Bank of England is asking for Brits to turn in $20 and $50 notes? No, but everybody's sort of talking about Bank of England collapse. A friend of mine sent me the Japanese bond market is about to collapse, and some people think this is might trigger a coming economic collapse. Which, I mean, there are people way smarter than me that do economic analysis that feel like there's going to be some kind of economic reckoning in the near future. I don't know when. JML, $5. No, let's see. The paper will not be exchangeable after the first. Well, what does that mean that they turn them in, but they're not exchangeable? Turn them in for what? Like you just turn them in and you don't get nothing back. So the bank is asking for donations. Is that what you mean? One more super chance, $50. Thank you so much. I read Deuteronomy in the Orthodox Study Bible when I was confused at the end where it talks about what happened to after Moses died, but isn't Moses the author of Deuteronomy? I think we're supposed to think that was Joshua adding that addendum. I think that's what most people think. But great question. Frankie D, $3. Because I think, doesn't it say kind of that Joshua kind of immediately steps up to leadership? Frankie D, $3. Do you know Sneeko? It would be great to have him on your show. So I tweeted at him. The tweet got 300 likes and shares. I tagged him on YouTube, and that got 400 or 500 likes. So again, I had a big Instagram profile. Christ and Culture reached out and said, "Hey, go on Joe Rogan." And then other Instagram profiles said, "Hey, go on Timcast." And then Frankie D says, "Hey, go on Sneeko." Guys, the way that you do this, okay, even if I tag somebody, even if it gets 300 thumbs up, 500 thumbs up or likes, that doesn't even mean that guy's going to see it. How will these people see my name if you guys keep putting it into their chat? 50 people putting my name as a recommendation or a request is much more likely to be seen than one person, me, tagging them, and they might not even ever see it, even if 500 people share it, right? If 500 people retweet me mentioning Sneeko, that's less likely for him to see it than 50 different people putting have Jay on, have Jay on, have Jay on, have Jay on, right? That's how you do it. You want to get me on Joe Rogan? It's not going to be me. Joe Rogan doesn't know who I am. Now I know that, I don't know if Tim knows, Tim probably doesn't know who I am, but Lydia knows who I am. So keep asking and reminding Lydia. Remember, this is how we got the Stefan debate and the Matt Dillahunty debate. If you guys remember back in 2018, 17, 18, I messaged all these people, right? I emailed Matt and I mentioned to Stefan in various ways, hey, let's do a discussion. Nobody ever even knew. I don't even know if they ever saw it. But the debates didn't happen until it just constantly was mentioned and brought up. That's how you do it. So it's you guys that are in charge of it. Even though you see my name and it has almost 100,000 subscribers, that just doesn't mean that when I tag them, they're even going to see it. It doesn't mean that when I tweet at them, they're even going to see it. But if 50 different people in 50 different tweets see my name, then they will. They will see it. Now, they might not do it, but they're going to see it. That's the point. So that's how we do that. That's how we got the people previously. Do you follow the drama and recent actions with Fuentes? No, I haven't followed nor am I aware of any of that. I never follow any dramas. People ask me all the time. They tell me about what, I don't know anybody's media dramas. I don't ever follow any. I don't have time to do that. Ever. And then people, when I meet people, they start asking me, I'm like, I don't know anything about these people's dramas. I have no idea what you're talking about. I purposely avoid any of that. Because I don't have the time and there's absolutely no point in me getting involved in anybody's drama. So, no, I don't know anybody's internet drama at all. And I don't want to know, right? I think when you get older and you kind of grow out of the desire for, I want to know the dirt. I don't even want to know people's dirt, okay? I just want to do my thing and do what I do. That's it. The other thing I think people don't understand either is that I never, ever, maybe once a month, literally once a month, do I see the normal Twitter feed. So I think people think that like I scan this all day or every day. I never, ever see the normal Twitter feed. The only thing I see is the all. Under the notifications, the all, that's all I ever check, ever. So I have no idea what anybody else is tweeting about, who's tweeting at who. And if you don't tweet at me, I don't see it. The only time I go to that main homepage where I see everybody else's tweets is if I click on the homepage or open up the app. And then I see, Sneck said this. Oh, Dave said this. Michael Saylor tweeted about Bitcoin. And that's maybe once 3 weeks. That's it. So I have no idea what anybody's drama is. I don't follow any of it, and I don't want to know. Storm the Cat, $1. Do you like Kraftwerk? I have a Kraftwerk CD. And by the way, that everybody was making fun of me because in the interview, I don't mind. It was funny. In the interview with Mike from I'm Doing Great, he was like, "You don't know New Order." I never was a big fan of New Order. Obviously, like I like that one song that was on the radio, but. For me, Britpop, that's straight up Depeche Mode, dude. That's it. I mean, Depeche Mode, one of my favorite bands, period. I have all Depeche Mode's albums. But to me, that's Britpop. Not dissing New Order. I like a lot of the new wave and all that stuff, but it just wasn't really what I latched onto. I had a Depeche Mode poster when I was in high school in my room when I was a high school music poster guy, right? So that's really the essence of like Britpop for me. That's always been my favorite. That's what I flock to. But so I have a Kraftwerk album on my playlist, and I listen to it every now and then when it pops up, like if I have things on random. But I'm not a huge Kraftwerk fan, but I recognize their place in the early phases of electronica. Well, Emmanuel, $5. Can't wait for the next theology stream to see the geopolitical questions. I'm joking. Thank you. Yeah, well, when I do a geopolitics stream, we get the theology questions. If I do a theology stream, sometimes I look at the geopolitics. Whatever. It's fine. I don't care. I mean, the audience different people come for different reasons. Especially when you do a live event, you meet people and it's like, oh, I've liked your Hollywood stuff. Oh, I like your geopolitical stuff, right? So you never know who's there for what. So anyway. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Subscribe to the website of the Rockfin for the part 2 lecture of the Ratiu book, Milner-Fabian Conspiracy. It's going to be a good one. We're going to get deep into it. And again, this may have to be 3 lectures. And I want to remind you guys too, next live event is October 15th. I'll be speaking on technocracy and the writings of Brzezinski. So there is that event. To get tickets, this is a ticketed event with Courtney. If you guys remember the Dr. James Lindsay interview, that was with Courtney. This is Courtney's event. So the tickets are there at her site. And you buy the tickets. And yes, I've hired private security for this event too. From now on, I always hire private security. So I won't be doing any live events that I don't have hired private security at. So yes, they will be there for me. I don't know if people want to assassinate her for her, I'm just joking, for her Silk's body movement presentation. So she's going to be doing something very different. So she does a lot of motivational speaking relating to her fitness stuff. And she does aerial dance and aerial silk stuff. So she's going to be doing that, and her presentation, I don't know what it is. I have not seen her presentation. But she's very agile and adept at these things. So she'll be doing that. And I will be giving a talk, 45 minutes to an hour, on the writings of Brzezinski, technocracy, etc., and other global elite writers. And yes, I'll have my books there. So that'll be fun. But you do have to buy tickets for the event. It's a ticketed event. So that's the link in the show description for that event, October 15th. That is a Saturday. And the event is, what time is it at? It's at a performing arts theater, Saturday, October 16th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I don't know the order of the events. I don't know if she goes first. It doesn't matter. But anyway, if you want to go, that's it. Get the tickets there at her site. And everybody have a good night. And we got another super chat. Petty for $20. This was a nice talk Sunday. Oh, so you got to see the Sunday talk at Metropolitan Jonas Parish. Thank you. I wish I had time to speak to you about philosophy, but we were in the back and we had to drive to West Virginia. But we had to drive back to West Virginia. No problem. I understand. God bless you and keep up the great work that you do. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the talk. That's the same talk that I give when we do the live events like we did in Nashville and Orlando. So you guys got to see the